All right, call to order. This is the June 16th, 2015 meeting of the Sunshine Ordinance Task Force Complaint Committee, hearing room 408 at 4 p.m. Let's do the roll call.
On the call the roll, Member Pilpill.
Present.
Pilpill present. Member Haynes.
Present.
Haynes present. Chair Hepner.
Present.
Hepner present. I do not have any agenda changes to announce.
Okay, and I see the next item on
Can we also just make clear that I was appointed to the committee for today by Chair Washburn, who could not be here.
Yes, yes.
So everyone knows.
Yes.
Hello, everyone.
Item number 2, public comment. Members of the public may address the complaint committee on matters that are within the committee's jurisdiction but not on today's agenda.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair Hepner. I'm Patrick Shaw here on my own time today. I have 2 items to report to you. One is the good news is the Board of Supervisors, within the last 45 minutes, passed an amendment to the Sunshine Ordinance requiring that the Board of Supes and a few other elected officials who are not named in the Sunshine Ordinance as being required to maintain calendars, just passed that on a 10-to-1 vote with Board President London Breed abstaining.
Voting no.
Voting no. I'm sorry, not abstaining, voting no. It was ironic when she was appointed board pres at the end of January, and then suddenly in February decided she would no longer keep a calendar. Wonder what she's trying to hide. Second bit of good news is I've been complaining to the employee retirement system that my written 150-word testimony had been being placed for several months at the end of the document instead of incorporated next to the agenda item in the body of the minutes where I made the actual public testimony. Happily, they introduced a motion last week and voted to go ahead and incorporate the minutes and correct them to move my testimony back to where it belongs in their agenda items order. So I think I've saved you some work filing a sunshine complaint that you will not have to be dragged through.
Thank you very much.
Could I just follow up to Mr. Monette Shaw? When the retirement board adopts the minutes to that meeting, if you could send a copy to us and maybe point us to that section where they adopted the motion, I'd be interested in seeing the discussion and the vote in the minutes. If you can.
I absolutely will forward them to you. I plan on asking for the draft minutes in the next couple of days.
Cool.
But you have to remember they don't always record accurately in the minutes what actually transpires.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Task Force members. Thomas Piccirillo. It doesn't surprise me that the President of the Board of Supervisors would vote against disclosing the supervisors' calendars. If you recall, at the last task force meeting, there were 3 complaints against her, and she didn't appear on any of the complaints. Secondly, I'm disappointed that your Compliance and Amendments Committee did not meet today. As you know, you only meet every other month. Your last meeting was April. I urge you to meet either sometime this month or next month and not wait 60 days. The Compliance Committee has a jurisdiction of enforcing the orders of determination. And if the orders of determination are not enforced, then you're really spinning your wheels having these hearings. I have 2 orders of determination that are outstanding and haven't been enforced. One against Supervisor Farrell for public comment during the budget process. That's the order of determination was 8 months ago. There's been no compliance with that order of determination. The second one was an order of determination against the fire department. I still have not received the documents, and that order of determination is almost 4 months old. So I urge the Compliance and Amendments Committee to meet and start enforcing your orders of determination. Thank you.
One and the other one's a DOT, I think. Fire is here, and his other thing is still a DOT.
Right.
Go ahead.
Hi, Michael Petrellis. I want to get it into the public record that I'm very disappointed. Neither one of the gay supervisors, Scott Wiener nor David Campos, are advocating for a budget item to wire all of these rooms. I want every room in City Hall wired so that we can have transparency for all of the commissions that meet here. As we know, in this room, there are no cameras. If there were cameras, we could just flip a switch and then everyone could watch the great work that the Sunshine Ordinance Task Force does. I've also been trying to get the Fire Commission and the San Francisco Housing Authority to air their meetings on TV. They are more than willing to air their meetings on TV, but because there aren't enough rooms wired in City Hall, they are on a waiting list for a room that is wired. Yet, whether it's conservatives like Scott Wiener and London Breed, or liberals like Campos and Avalos, they're not advocating for increased transparency with a few dollars to wire all of these rooms. I also have to go on record saying I'm disappointed in both of the gay Democratic clubs. The Milk Club, the Alice Club, do not advocate for expanded sunshine. They are not here at City Hall. They are not on the web pushing for more funding to wire these rooms. I think that if Harvey Milk were alive, everyone is always saying, oh, what Harvey would do. Harvey would make sure each one of these rooms was wired. I also believe Alice B. Toklas would insist upon that. So until we get the Sunshine Task Force meetings aired on TV, we are not fully meeting our sunshine requirements, in my view. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any additional public comment? Seeing none, we can call the next item.
Item number 3, file number 15063, complaint filed by Michael Petrellis against District Attorney George Gascon and the Office of the District Attorney for allegedly violating Administrative Code Section 67.21, 67.25, and 67.29-5 for failure to respond to an immediate disclosure request for public records in a timely and or adequate manner, and failure to contain a daily calendar wherein is recorded the time and place of each meeting or event attended.
I'll move that we recommend finding jurisdiction.
I'll second that motion. And is there any public comment on the motion for jurisdiction? Seeing none, if we could take that without objection.
The motion to find jurisdiction is passed without objection.
Okay, the complainant will now have an opportunity to present their case.
Hi, Michael Petrellis again. This complaint is about what I believe is a very inadequate public calendar by the district attorney. I will say that the district attorney, in a timely manner, got me his calendar. However, what's on the calendar are entries for media events, his press conferences, or giving interviews to the New York Times or the Associated Press, or his events at various functions around town, or conferences that he attends beyond San Francisco. What's not on his calendar are any meetings with his staff, any meetings with lawmakers. Many of his days, there are no entries. I would get the sense that the district attorney is not at work, or he's not having meetings. I believe that the district attorney is keeping a separate calendar, and that calendar was not released to me. I'm asking this complaint committee to find the district attorney in noncompliance in terms of maintaining a calendar and putting all entries on it for how he is spending his days, and that calendar should be released to the public. Thank you.
The respondent, or is anybody here to provide facts or evidence in support of the complainant? Seeing none, the respondent now has an opportunity to address the task force.
Good afternoon, Alex Bastian for the San Francisco District Attorney's Office. Let me start off by saying go Warriors. As it relates to this particular incident and what Mr. Petrellis is speaking of, as this body is aware, the one part of the calendar really requires it to be about public business, right? And the question is whether it is in the function of public business that these incidents have been placed in the calendar or not placed in the calendar. Now, as it relates to the District Attorney's Office, as you are aware, the District Attorney's Office does have a prosecutorial function, and that prosecutorial function does have investigative privileges that apply. So, for example, if, for example, people are gathered together to discuss a case as it relates to investigations, as it relates to the investigator on the case, as it relates to entities within the office that are really discussing investigative means or prosecutorial means, those things would not be afforded to the public business because they would be exempt as part of the investigative privilege. So with that, I'm open to any questions, and that's all I have to say.
Okay, and is there anybody present to offer facts or evidence on behalf of the respondent? Seeing nobody, the matter is now with the Complaints Committee of the Task Force. Member Petrellis. Excuse me, Member Pilpel.
I apologize. Can I just add one more thing?
Yes.
I just wanted to add that actually Mr. Petrellis did indicate something that was slightly incorrect. Our response was not timely. Mr. Petrellis sent an email Sunday night to the district attorney's email address, and we did not respond in a timely manner. It was completely an oversight. However, what happened was Mr. Petrellis sent a reminder email on that Thursday or on that Friday on April 17, I believe, and within a few hours I was able to respond to him in a timely manner. What we've done is we've changed it so that we now have a system that really categorizes things so that hopefully will never happen again. I just wanted to throw that out there as well.
I appreciate that, and I do admit I was surprised that the complainant said that it was a timely response. It seems pretty express that it was not, and I wanted to explore what the district attorney's office was doing in order to better field sunshine requests. I'm pleased that a system's gone into place. This is something that we've seen over and over and over again where, additional email addresses have been set up or an auto response that says if this is, about sunshine, you need to send this to this person.
Correct.
To make sure that, if it's being sent to a supervisor and not, say, the aide in the supervisor's office who is handling that. So I may have a couple questions on that, but as the complainant does not seem to have an issue there, I would like to sort of delve into the other issues of the complaint, which go to the adequacy of the response. Member Pilpel, did you have questions?
Yeah, so let me start with Mr. Bastian.
Sure.
Let me get it right. Bastian?
Bastian.
Bastian. Okay. And so that we're clear in the future, you're the general point person on sunshine requests in your office?
Correct. Either myself or a member of my team.
Okay.
And
Mr. Zabo is your backup on this, but you're the point person, and from you it goes to Ms. DeBerry and then to Mr. Gascon. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. So in the future, we should try to notify the three of you when things come in if we get a complaint, because I'm trying to be sure that we route it to the right person for
Correct.
response.
And it's been routed to me. I've talked to Victor before.
Yeah, no, it's all good. Okay. I think there's general agreement there was a timeliness problem, so
Definitely.
we may find that violation. But I think the real issue here is the calendar requirement. Can you walk with me through 67.29-5?
Sure.
It's in the packet on page 5 and other places. And let me just read it quickly for a second. The mayor, the city attorney, and every department head shall keep or cause to be kept a daily calendar wherein is recorded the time and place of each meeting or event attended by that official, with the exclusion of purely personal or social events of which no city business is discussed and that do not take place at city offices or at the offices or residences of people who do substantial business with or otherwise substantially financially affected by actions of the city. For meetings not otherwise publicly recorded, the calendar shall include general statement of issues discussed. Such calendars shall be public records and shall be available to the requester or to any requester 3 business days subsequent to the calendar entry date. So I hear what you're saying and what you provided in writing about the DA and prosecutorial discretion and blah, 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 blah. And I saw some of the calendar pages that were provided. Apparently, there was a large amount of calendar entries
Correct.
or calendar pages, some of which have, even on weekday business days, absolutely nothing to report, which is a concern. So I'm just starting with the plain language, which says to me that something should be reported relative to what, and I think we agree that the district attorney is a department head, is subject to this requirement, et cetera, where something is reported for how the district attorney conducts his day. And I would be satisfied with an entry that says, internal staff meetings, Hall of Justice, or, flew to conference in Chicago or LA, meeting with LA Times editorial board, some of the other things that were disclosed. But just sort of some general accounting of the time, and even if it's an internal meeting to discuss, how to prosecute a case, internal staff meeting or discussions regarding prosecution of case. I mean, I think there are general descriptions that you can give without revealing, and I don't read this requirement to mean that the content of the discussions are revealed in a calendar, just simply who someone is meeting with, so long as that's, not, and that could be redacted, frankly, and just the general topic. So, I think, and I like a little discussion on that, but I think that you can have, some kind of calendar that doesn't get you into, disclosing things that would violate a privilege or otherwise, shouldn't be out there.
So my response to that is, for example, if you're meeting with a victim of a case. What was that?
If you could speak through the microphone just to make sure that it's on the
I
record.
just want to be able to
Yeah,
have
of
eye
course.
contact. I don't want to be rude.
I apologize.
Sometimes, as it relates to investigative communications, for example, the fact that you're talking to someone as it relates to an investigation, and I'm a prosecutor as well, and I could tell you that if someone is coming forward to talk to you about a case and you're investigating a case, now I'm not saying this is necessarily applicable to this particular situation. I'm just trying to delve into the investigative and prosecutorial nature of things. If someone is coming in and talking to you about a case, the fact that that person is coming in and talking to you in itself is something that I wouldn't want out there in the public eye. Let's say, for example, someone is coming forward to talk about a particular incident that transpired. That person can be labeled, for example, an informant.
I understand.
That's part of it. Part of it is also who you're meeting with, but I'm more than happy to delve into it more if you like.
So, having a calendar entry on Friday, April 10th that said, meeting with a guy to talk about a thing is better than not having anything. And even if it is, meeting with a guy to talk about a thing, which could be, meeting with the deputy DA to discuss an approach to a particular case, meeting with a guy to talk about a thing certainly suggests to me that the DA is doing something as opposed to this, which doesn't tell me that anything's going on. So I think I would encourage you to find a way to be somewhat disclosive.
Okay.
And, if it's all morning meetings at Hall of Justice, then you just say staff meetings all morning, right? And if it's a meeting with the police chief to discuss issues, then you just say meeting with Chief Sir to discuss issues. And I think that's better than nothing. And where you can disclose, the more you can disclose, the better. That's reasonable. But I think you got to do something. And if most of the entries are like this, that suggests to me that that's not a Prop G or a 29-5 compliant calendar. That's sort of where I'm going with it.
Thank you, Member Pilpel. I have a couple questions as well. First of all, just a clarifying question. I see here that the calendars in our packet are for the dates April 1st through 10th, 2015. The request was for a broader period of time than that. Is there a reason?
Only gave us a
They were
subset.
provided, but due to
thought
the
I
size of
provided all of that.
the documents, I did not print them all out.
Okay. So this was a representative sampling of what was actually produced then?
Yes, and I do have a complete copy if you do want to push to review it.
Could you make a note?
They
next
get very
time
voluminous.
So that we know that.
They get very voluminous in nature.
So I'm going to go ahead and assume that all of the calendars produced were in this format. And this looks like it's a paper format, maybe a publicly maintained, is it on a wall, or where is this calendar physically? Where does it physically exist? It looks like the entries onto it are handwritten, so it's not an electronically maintained calendar.
Correct. It's in a binder.
It's in a binder, okay. And who maintains this calendar?
The personal assistant.
The personal assistant to District Attorney Gascon?
Yes.
Okay. And is that personal, what's the name of that personal assistant?
What was that?
What's the name of the personal assistant?
I mean, it's her when she's there. If she's not there, it'll be someone else, but her name is Robin.
Okay.
Yeah.
And is Robin the only person maintaining or putting entries into here?
So that was my point. Sometimes, perhaps, if Robin is, let's say, off on leave, or if she's not at work on that day, there is another person that can fill in for that assignment, and there is another person that does fill in that assignment. And that's what I was referring to as it relates to two different people checking things as well.
Okay. And does District Attorney Gascon ever enter entries into the calendar himself?
I'm not certain. I wouldn't be the person to know that information.
Does District Attorney Gascon maintain a calendar on his phone or in another database that has his personal meetings?
I don't know. I don't know what his whether he has a personal calendar, if he doesn't have a personal calendar.
Okay, that would be good to know. I mean, I share Member Pilpel's skepticism that this is the only calendar that District Attorney Gascon relies upon to conduct his day-to-day business. And I think that, as Member Pilpel suggested, at a minimum, a block that says meeting with Deputy DA so-and-so, or, information about meetings, about internal business that redact personal identifying information, that should be in the calendar. Meetings with other city officials. I find it, I guess I'm only looking at a 10-day period, but the only entries on here, and they're very sparse. Most days in our record have nothing on them at all.
Victor.
But our media interview with SF Chronicle, media interview with KKSF, and that's on one day. Participate and walk to work day on the morning of April 9th. It just doesn't, and then no other information for April 9th. I find it hard to believe that this is, well, first of all, I don't think that this is a calendar that is compliant with the Sunshine Ordinance. And I'm going to throw it out there that I find it hard to believe this is the only calendar that District Attorney Gascon relies upon to conduct his public business. It just seems odd, particularly in the era of everybody's maintaining calendars digitally. And I note that the calendar was requested in a digital format, I suppose, in sort of the assumption that this is an electronically maintained calendar. Who would have an answer to that, whether there's another calendar that District Attorney Gascon relies upon to conduct his public business?
I can find out for you. I can just make a couple of questions. I can ask a couple of questions and find that out. I don't believe there is another calendar. I believe this is the only calendar as it relates to public business. Now, that being said, I recognize that you have cited me to certain ordinances. I just want to once again clarify that as a district attorney's office, given that we do have an investigative role, given that we do have a prosecutorial role, there are cases on point. For example, Rivero v. Superior Court and the California Government Code 25303, where
I'm familiar with the Rivero
Okay.
decision, and in part, this section 67.24, one of them, E, I think, was crafted in part in response, or F, in response to Rivero. But this provision was really set up to give the members of the public an understanding of what department heads do all day. Are they meeting with lobbyists? Are they meeting with their staff? Are they, spending time on the golf course? What are they doing? And it's an accountability tool. And I don't think I'm certainly not suggesting, I don't think we're suggesting that you disclose anything that would get into security or investigative techniques or prosecutorial anything. So I don't think we're trying to override state law or your discretion, any of that. Just give a sense of what the DA is doing all day long. And I think we would be having the same conversation with any other representative of any other department head.
See, that's the thing, though. Given that we are a prosecuting agency, we're actually uniquely situated in that regard. And the fact that, for example...
But the city attorney maintains a calendar, and I don't know if Mr. Petralis has asked for that. I would assume that the same kind of thing could be said, either discussion of pending litigation or, reviewing litigation strategy or... You can come up with something that doesn't necessarily say the case or the topic, discussing murder, whatever, just something. I also wanted to point out one other thing in your response, which is fascinating, by the way. I'm really enjoying it. You suggest that the calendar only reflects entries where the DA was scheduled to attend, not whether he did in fact attend. That doesn't square with the plain language of the ordinance, which is wherein is recorded the time and place of each meeting or event attended by that official. And the reason why in the last sentence it requires that the calendar be made available 3 business days subsequent to the calendar entry date was so that officials have an opportunity to put on the calendar things that they actually did, to redact for whatever reason, and to make available. So it's not like you have to wait weeks, or that if you ask for it in advance that you can go ambush the guy at some event. It's so that it's a record of things that have transpired so that one can say, oh, okay, based on all of this, it looks like you're spending, 20% of your time doing media interviews, and I'm not crazy about that, so I'm going to run against you next time there's an election. Whatever. You get some of the color and flavor. If I have a sec, could I just ask Mr. Petralis? Thank you. Have I roughly captured what you're thinking, and is there some level of detail is there some specific level of detail or some types of entries that you think are lacking, and if they just provided something that would satisfy your thing, do you want them to go back and, rewrite try to reconstruct a whole year or a month or something, or just have a different practice going forward?
I'm going to ask you to hold that question until it's my time to respond to your questions. Okay. I was raising my hand to make a point of information that I have requested similar calendars in the past 2 or 3 years from the sheriff, Chief Greg Sir at the police department, and City Attorney Dennis Herrera. And I can tell you that all of those calendars included information about the police chief was meeting with Joyce Hicks, who's director of the Office of Citizen Complaint, from 4 to 5. That kind of information, similar information with Mercarimi's calendar. I would say this, that Mercarimi's calendar was the most detailed in terms of he was meeting with his staff, he was meeting with them at the jail, and also there was information about what the topic was. There were also entries on Mercarimi's official calendar naming some of the folks he was meeting with in his department. So we have the police chief, the city attorney, and the sheriff keeping proper calendars, and you've not had to deal with a complaint from me on any of those folks. I think that the thing that is really sticking out is the district attorney's calendar.
Could I suggest, perhaps, as a way to help? We're all trying to do better here. If you could maybe help the DA by pointing them to those calendars, maybe if you could provide copies of some of those. No?
It is their responsibility to meet the law.
Very good.
And I would like to move this toward a motion. And the only question I have, one more additional question for Mr. Bastian.
Sure.
Is there another place that, if it's not a calendar, but another notebook that reflects what meetings took place on a certain day?
I don't believe there is another notebook. I think that's the calendar, and I think that's the only calendar that exists. But let me just clarify one thing. Every entity that was just mentioned right now, SFPD, city attorney, all of those are city agencies, right? We are uniquely situated as the San Francisco District Attorney's Office. We perform a state function, even though we are a locality or a local agency.
The sheriff is also a state officer.
Can you, I would like for the respondent to continue.
I was going to say that we are uniquely positioned given that particular difference. And that is why the cases, and actually the case Rivero v. Superior Court and the California Government Code section that I cited to in my papers, give us the investigative and prosecutorial privilege that's applicable. It's a uniquely situated situation altogether. It's very unique for that reason, and that is why comparing, let's say, the city attorney's office or the San Francisco Police Department to the district attorney's office would be a distinction there.
I tell you what, I just don't believe that accounts, or that any privilege would account for full days, full weeks being left completely blank. I don't think that any privilege accounts for that amount of non-disclosure. So, maybe we can respectfully disagree on that. Maybe we need to just come to an agreement about what should be recorded on the calendar to make sure that it's compliant with 67.29-5. And I'll note, too, that there are some, big changes coming through the pipeline right now. The Board of Supervisors just approved an amendment to this section of the Sunshine Ordinance, and it details a lot more information with specificity that has to be recorded, that must be recorded in a public calendar. And I assume that a lot of that is going to fall under privileged information that is not disclosable by the district attorney. But in any event, it's a lot more. I mean, it would account for information to be disclosed that is, it would not result in a calendar that's produced that is completely blank for a week at a time. My thinking is that we're going to find a violation, or at this point, procedurally the way this works is that the complaint committee recommends that the full task force finds a violation. I feel comfortable making a motion for a violation of 67.29-5. And a violation of 67.21 subsection A?
25A.
25A, is that for a failure to respond timely to an IDR request?
Yeah.
Okay. So for those two sections of the Sunshine Ordinance, and I'm going to put that out there as a motion.
May we take rebuttals first?
Oh, yes, excuse me. My goodness, that is my thinking, but I'm happy to hear rebuttals, and hopefully that will inform your rebuttals. I believe the complainant has the first opportunity to rebuttal?
No, the
Respondent. Thank you.
Whatever recommendation you make, I'm more than happy to check in with our city attorney's office and see what it is that we're legally obligated to do, and more than happy to work that out.
Thank you. And a rebuttal from the complainant.
Yes, I cannot remember the year when it was big news that a drunk firefighter had injured a motorcyclist. I had the calendar for the district attorney for that week, and it clearly said he was holding a press conference to discuss that case. And that was a good example of how when the DA wants to put it on his calendar, what he's holding a press conference about, he does it, okay? I also find it very disturbing that this office is supposed to uphold the law, is really asking for a lot of wiggle room to get out of adhering to the Sunshine Law. And the last thing is there is a big need for the district attorney, who we are paying, to tell us how he is spending his days, including he had a meeting with his assistant DAs for an hour. He does not have to put in there what the cases were about. And I am also really tired of coming here with these kind of complaints. And Alex is a nice guy, but so much of his responses that I got on camera are, I don't know. I'm not sure who keeps the calendar. calendar. I mean, are these offices sitting down with the staff and the person who the complaint is against and posing what are going to be questions asked as the Sunshine Task Force? I don't get the sense that the answer is yes. I'm asking you to find the district attorney in violation of the law that requires him to maintain a genuine calendar.
Thank you. The matter is now with the complaint committee.
I believe the motion is to find a violation of 67.29-5 and 67.25A. The motion was made by Chair Hepner. Is there a second?
You want a second or sure? Okay.
Public comment?
Yeah, public comment on the motion, please, if there is any.
Yeah, Thomas Picarello. I strongly support the motion. I'm troubled by the ADA now saying, after he heard the motion of a violation of the sunshine, he was now going to go talk to the city attorney and see if he should or should not disclose the calendar. He should have gone to the city attorney prior to giving blank calendar pages to Mr. Petrellis. Secondly, it is troubling also by that statement in that it assumes that if the city attorney says he doesn't have to give over any of those pages, he's not going to comply with your order anyway. Mr. Piper was correct. Rivera is no longer controlling as the calendars for district attorneys in the city and county of San Francisco. What was cited by the ADA's legal memorandum was that work product and attorney-client privilege goes on forever. If the case is closed 10 years ago, he's still going to assert attorney-client privilege and work product. 6725D says that's not true. Where the case is concluded, those documents are to be disclosed. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any additional public comment on the motion? Seeing none?
Just one last thing. I think the reason that I checked earlier about who's who is that we still had David Pfeiffer listed as a contact. He's no longer with your office. He's now with the city attorney on the trial team or something. So we won't contact him. You're the guy. Okay, great. Member Haynes had a thing.
I was just going to ask if I can make a request. You stated that you are going to determine what you guys can disclose. If you could report to us based on the new rulings that are coming out, so we can see the compare and contrast, that would be great.
Sure.
I would ask that that be provided to me prior to the July 1st meeting. By how much time do you need to prepare that, may I ask?
It would take some time. First of all, I would have to reach out to the city attorney's office. I would have to be able to sit down with them. I would have to examine the new rules. I would have to make a comparison and see what it is that we're obligated to do. I would have to do the research on it, and I would have to be able to give the city attorney's office time to do research on it as well. So whatever is convenient for this body.
Can I suggest that we forward this out today? If we get this to the task force in July, if the task force finds a violation, it'll come back either to this committee or to EOT, and we will have further discussions about better calendars. So
I can accept that.
there will be more chit-chat about this.
And I think by this committee, you mean the Compliance and Amendments Committee,
Yes.
which is, in fact, not this committee, but
A
just for
committee.
point of clarification. Okay.
On that motion, Member Pilpil.
Aye.
Pilpil, aye. Member Haynes.
Aye.
Haynes, aye. Chair Hepner.
Aye.
Hepner, aye. The motion passes. The complaint committee recommends the violations of 67.29-5 and 67.25 and refers the matter to the Sunshine Ordinance Task Force July 1st meeting for review.
And just on that note, this is going before the full task force now. If you have an answer to the question whether additional calendars are capped, that an answer to that question would be very helpful, and your own research as to what must be disclosed, what may not be disclosed, what that information from the city attorney. That'd also be helpful.
Okay, whether or not there are additional calendars that are kept for public business, to have an answer by July 1st.
Right.
Okay. I'm fairly certain there isn't, but I'll confirm it.
Okay.
Any other information that you have relative to this case, just send it to Victor. It'll get in the file.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. That concludes item number 3 on the agenda. Let's call the next item.
Item number 4, file number 15087, complaint filed by Alex Aldrith against General Manager Phil Ginsburg and the Recreation and Parks Department for allegedly violating Administrative Code, Section 67.21, for failure to respond to requests for public records in an adequate manner.
Move to find jurisdiction.
I'll second that. And if, is there any public comment on the motion for jurisdiction? Seeing none, if we could take that without objection.
Motion for jurisdiction passes without objection.
And at this point, the complainant has 5 minutes to present his case to the task force.
Hello, my name is Alex Aldrich, and my complaint is against the San Francisco Recreation and Park Department, and that they did not respond to my sunshine requests under Section 67.21, with the information backing Phil Ginsburg's assertion that there is a long-standing regulations that say bikes are not allowed on earthen trails. And in the email correspondence that I had, Mr. Kern responded with a different statement than Phil Ginsburg, and that Mr. Kern's statement was one of park stewardship and land management. For example, closing an area to get resodded would be kind of what I would understand as land management or park stewardship. And I responded back with a question asking to clarify one of 2 questions, which is Mr. Ginsburg's statement: in all other parklands, bikes are not allowed on earthen trails, was made in error, or provide the regulations that support the assertion cycling is not permitted on earthen trails in any park. And Eric Pawlowski responded that they're standing with Mr. Kern's statement as the response to the public records request. And what I received was just one of no policy or information. At no point was I provided with search terms for my request as stated to give in the Sunshine Task Force complaint. And then Phil Ginsburg says that there are long-standing regulations. That means that there's more than one. And all they provided to me was the generic park code 3.02, which is signs are to be obeyed. There's nothing that says bikes are not allowed. He sent me pictures, or I was sent pictures of signage, current signage, but there's nothing from the past. There were no maps, no pictures, nothing in regards to long-standing bike policy. So I've been riding on these trails since I was 13 years old, and not once have I ever had a problem on the trails, and I've never seen any notice or any kind of community meetings regarding trail access. I also want to note that the Recreation and Park Department sent out in their April 1st newsletter that they had a photo contest winner from the Greater and Greener Conference at Mission. And the winner, his name is Trevor Rice, said, "Here's one of my favorite parks in SF, John McLaren," he posted. "I love the multi-use vibe here, both dog and bike friendly, with great facilities and some amazing views of the city thrown in." This is just one example of, I would say, of the many instances of people calling McLaren Park a multi-use park, a multi-use for trails. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Aldrich. And at this point, is there anybody to offer facts or information on behalf of the complainant?
Yes, my name is Tom Borden, and I just wanted to sort of make a legalistic note that under Section 67.21, the custodian is to provide a statement as to the existence, quantity, form, and nature of records relating to a particular subject. And Alex had asked very pointedly for anything that supports the assertion that bikes are not allowed on earthen trails. And the response from Denny Kern did not address this whatsoever. He said that there were specific instances where bikes would be prohibited or restricted via the signage. But Phil's assertion is that there's a blanket prohibition against cycling on earthen trails. And so there's been and that has not been addressed. So there's been no statement from Rec and Park about the existence or quantity of records related to this assertion. So what Alex was asking for quite directly, I think, was for Rec and Park either to divulge these regulations, A, or B, state that the regulations supporting that do not exist. So we want a statement of existence or non-existence of these things. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And at this time, is there anybody else to offer facts or evidence on behalf of the complainant? Seeing nobody, the respondent will now have an opportunity to address the complaint committee.
Good afternoon, task force members. I'm Eric Pulowski with the Recreation and Park Department. On May 1st, 2015, the Recreation and Park Department responded in full to Mr. Aldrich's April 22nd public records request, fulfilling our obligation to respond within 10 days. The relevant regulations Mr. Aldrich was seeking in his request was Park Code Section 3.02, which vests the department with the authority to post signs restricting activities that can damage the park lands or jeopardize the safety of park users. In considering our response, the department believed Mr. Aldrich's request merited further explanation beyond a simple reference to Park Code Section 3.02, and so the department provided a detailed explanation of its regulatory approach toward bicycling on earthen trails. In its response, the department explained its regulatory approach to bicycling in parks through a framework of park stewardship and land management in accordance with its mission. We explained that at least since 2008, we have used signage to prohibit bicycling on specific earthen trails, the authority for which is provided by Park Code Section 3.02. No additional documents exist that could be provided in response to this request. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And at this time, we'll hear facts or evidence in support of the respondent. Seeing none, the matter is now at the complaint committee. Member Bilbo, if you would like to begin.
Let me start again with the who's who. Olive is no longer with the department. She retired a couple of months back.
That's correct.
Okay. And are you, and Denny's the operations guy, you're not in Sarah's chain, you're in...
I'm part of the Department of Strategic Planning Union.
Which is, what's her name?
Myself, Taylor Emerson.
Taylor,
and
right.
I report to our Director of Administration and Finance, Catherine Petruccioni.
Okay, so you're in Katie's group, you're not... Okay. Are you sort of the Sunshine Point guy until Olive gets replaced?
On a temporary basis until Olive's replacement's on board.
And Sarah sort of supervises, so she's kind of the mid-level person?
The responsibility currently rests with me.
Okay, but from you to Phil is?
Nobody.
Okay, all right. All right, thank you on that. As to the substance of the response, I think the response was timely. I don't think there's any question about that. The issue for me is whether simply citing to the Park Code 3.02 is sufficient. You, in your statement, you read something beyond the language that's in here, something about for purpose of maintaining trails or something?
Land stewardship?
No, you talked about that. You stated that as one of the bases for 3.02. The way I'm reading 3.02, it's just if you post a sign, someone has to obey it. But I'm not reading in that, and I guess I don't want to get too far into figuring out the park code, that it creates specific restrictions. I think it just sort of says that signs are enforceable. So it seemed to me that the request was looking to some kind of regulation that prohibited bikes on certain trails on some basis, and looking for what that might say and when it was created and blah, blah, blah. And it sounds like you haven't found or disclosed such a thing.
The regulations exist through the implementation of our responsibilities.
Yeah, that's a little confusing to try to decipher.
Agreed.
So Do you want to try once to translate that to English for us?
No. That's,
Okay. And I guess I didn't see into Mr. Borden's point, I didn't see a 67.21C request. If Mr. Aldrich wants to request all, an inventory of all documents related to this matter, he could file a separate 67.21C request that specifically asked for that, and the department would have to provide it. I didn't see that in this request. This seemed to be just looking for the regs. So what you're telling us is that there is nothing beyond 3.02?
and Mr. Kern's explanation, correct.
So I don't want to belabor this because I got other things. When the department places any sort of restriction, notice, prohibition, or direction on a sign, is it simply based on the circumstances at that particular location, and there need not be any explanation for that basis? So if it says, don't walk here, or don't swing on the trees, or don't do anything, the department feels that there isn't any reason to explain or any need for a prohibitory regulation, that the sign is merely communicating?
I don't have the exact text of Park Code Section 3.02 in front of me, but it basically to the fact it says that all signs in parks shall be obeyed.
Right. And so what I'm asking is, understanding that signs are to be obeyed, the restriction that it's communicating, does that not have to be set out somewhere?
In some circumstances, but not this one. There's nothing in the Park Code to that effect.
There's, if I may, so there's no sort of store of what all the sign, there's no, is there any inventory of every sign that's posted in parks, or of signs that are posted in parks?
No.
So if I ask you for a list of every sign posting a regulation, or every sign posted in McLaren Park, could that be done?
Theoretically, what I would do is I would search our purchasing records.
Okay. Or, an installation record.
Correct.
Okay.
So how do the park rangers enforce the park code?
Well, in the case of signage, if someone is disobeying a posted sign, they would have the authority, although we make it a point to use it on a very limited basis, to issue a citation.
And if I may, a little ping pong, but when a sign is going up that is going to post a restriction, what is the process for determining what restriction is placed on that sign? If it's not something that already exists in the park code, for instance.
There's nothing set in stone if something doesn't already exist.
Okay. So this may
would that happen?
This may be something, right? That's a more open question. I was going to ask a more leading question, but how would that happen? How would you come around to a new restriction that would manifest in a sign at a park?
Could you restate that? I'm not sure I'm clear.
Yeah, so if
somebody opens a new park and there's some trail that either has a natural area or has some steep slope and whatever, and you want to post a sign that says you can't do something here, how do you come from, noticing a thing to getting a sign posted that has a restriction? Can you walk us through that?
Some aspects of the Natural Areas Program are...
whether it's NAP or not, either way.
Say that again?
Whether it's NAP or not, no matter what the circumstance.
I guess the dividing line would be with CEQA. In some cases, CEQA process is invoked, in which case there are very set out regulations and guidelines. Other instances, such in this case, the actions are ministerial.
So are you suggesting there was a CEQA process that led to
there was not in this
the
case,
sign
no.
in McLaren?
There was not. There was
Okay.
none, and was not required.
Okay, so if Mr. Aldrich were to make either a 67.21C request or just a follow-up, more specific request for all of the history of trail restrictions involving bikes, either in McLaren Park or throughout the whole system, could you speculate on how you might respond to that?
I would speculate that the way you phrase it is a little vague. As we discussed earlier, if you'd like an inventory of our signs, I could make a wholehearted attempt to obtain that inventory. Other than that, in terms of this case, nothing exists.
Yeah, I don't think that inventory was really asked for. I asked that in order to get an understanding of, how something would end up on a sign in a park, Mm-hmm. This is recalling that instance just last year where there was an ordinance to close the parks between certain hours at night. And in the course of discussing this, it was already determined that a lot of signs in parks already say that the park is closed between this hour and this hour, and it's enforceable, under Park Code Section 3.02. We're just issuing this regulation for uniformity across all the parks. So in this case, this appears, if I'm to believe what you're telling me right now, there is no regulation that provides that type of uniformity across parks.
That's correct.
Okay, and was that ever expressed, that statement? There is no regulation that establishes the uniform rule that you are seeking?
We believe Mr. Kern's response was that expression.
And Mr. Kern's response was that. Well, let's talk about Mr. Kern's response, because Mr. Ginsburg's response made no reference to Section 3.02.
Correct.
And only upon follow-up did Mr. Kern explain that 3.02 states this rule: no person shall willfully disobey the notices, prohibitions, or directions on any signpost. So that expression was made, but you see in this, there's no, I think what we're looking at what Mr. Aldrich was looking for. Is there a regulation that states that bikes are not allowed on earthen trails?
No.
There is not?
Correct, no.
And was that statement ever provided to Mr. Aldrich?
No.
Okay. I think that's, from what I'm hearing from Mr. Aldrich today, that was precisely the statement that he was looking for. Is there a regulation that says that bikes are not allowed on earthen trails? And if so, can you provide that to me?
I'm sorry. There's nothing in writing, as I said earlier.
Okay.
The regulation exists through our implementation of our land stewardship responsibilities.
But that's...
Okay, well, I think we're done, and maybe we can talk to Mr. Aldrich. I have a couple questions for Mr. Aldrich.
Can I ask Mr.
Yeah, but let's keep it moving. This is...
I understand. So on Mr. Ginsburg's response, page 49 of the packet, the signs posted in McLaren Park are correct and are consistent with long-standing regulations. So what are the long-standing regulations that Mr. Ginsburg is referring to in that sentence?
We don't allow bicycling on earthen trails except in the interior greenbelt and in a certain section of the Oak Woodlands of Golden Gate Park.
Okay. And where is that regulation codified?
It's not codified.
So how is that institutional knowledge passed down?
And how is that a long-standing regulation if it's not codified anywhere? How do you know it? Who told you?
That's probably
How did you learn that?
That's
related something to us. How'd you learn it?
Since 2008, we've been regulating.
How did you personally learn that?
Through our operations staff who implement the policy.
Specifically, who told you?
Well, Mr. Kern, he wrote the response.
Okay. So where is Mr. Kern today?
I do not know.
At the lodge at a meeting.
Okay, well, let's tone it down a little bit, because there was a response given and it was timely. The question is whether it was an adequate response that answered the question. I think giving Mr. Ginsburg the great benefit of the doubt, his reference to longstanding regulations was something that came out of his own head, because there is no longstanding regulation.
Nothing in writing, sir.
And yet you have this understanding, nevertheless, that this is something that you've been enforcing for a long time.
As explained, correct.
And that's because of the signs, and only because of the signs, no other reason.
The signs is the way we enforce the policy.
That is just the tough statement right there to enforce the policy. You made a reference to a policy that
bicycling is not allowed on earthen trails, except in the interior greenbelt and in a certain section of the Golden Gate Park.
So if a sign does not state there is no biking on this earthen trail, if there's no sign that states that, can you still enforce that policy?
Can we? I don't know the can question. I know we don't, because it wouldn't be fair.
Well, I think the answer would be you can't. You can't enforce that policy because there's no policy, there's no regulation.
What you're talking about is citation authority, and we wouldn't issue a citation without signage being posted, because that would be the park code section we'd cite in a citation.
Right, and I would take it one step further and say if there's no signage, you cannot, that you would be prohibited, you would be violating your own, you'd be exceeding your own authority to cite somebody under a policy that is neither codified nor provided to the public in any format. There's no notice to the public that this law exists. There's no...
I don't know the answer to that question.
Okay, so I think and then Mr. Aldrich, if I could bring you back up here for a question or two. Yeah, I think I think I'm satisfied. Unless there are any questions from other members of the complaint committee, we could just do rebuttals at this point. But just to be clear, Mr. Aldrich, did anybody ever tell you that there is or is not a written policy stating there is no biking on earthen trails?
RPD did not give me any regulation or regulations stating anything about bicycle. The only thing they gave me was just signs to be obeyed, which is a very generic park code. And I could say just at the Jerry Garcia Amphitheater recently, they did the same thing, where they changed the policy from dogs must be unleashed during permitted events to dogs must be unleashed at all times. And they did this without any input, but that's been a long-standing policy within the park for, I would say, since the 80s. And they just recently realized they did make a mistake. I would say it's very similar to what they're doing here, where they relied on probably the park manager, and the park manager just wanted to change it, but did not go through any public input. And this is very much the same thing, that they just want to imply their own will from the Natural Areas Program and just restrict access into the parks, specifically recreation.
Okay. And I thank you. Thank you. And I think that at this point we can hear rebuttals from the complainant and from the respondent. We'll start with the respondent.
I also want to note that, this is almost similar to, I would say, when there was a homeless problem in Golden Gate Park, they enacted a policy to stop that from happening. They did nothing with bikes. They just put up some signs that nobody knew about, didn't go to any community meeting, and everyone was completely surprised by it. And I know they spent over $500,000 on all these signs. And everybody's been asking for wayfinder signs, not for years, but for decades. But instead, they put up these restriction signs instead into John McLaren Park. And John McLaren was a person who did not want signs in the park. He didn't want any keep off the grass signs, which is exactly what the Recreation and Park Department is doing under Ginsburg.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
And rebuttal from the respondent at this point, you have an opportunity to address.
No rebuttal. Just want to say that we do understand his frustration, and we do the best we can given current resources and our very oftentimes competing objectives between natural land stewardship and recreation.
Thank you. And rebuttal from the complainant, if the complainant so desires, Mr. Aldrich. Okay, the matter is now with the members of the complaint committee. I'll start by saying that I do know that Parks and Rec, I should say Recs and Park, really, but that a response was provided in a timely manner. It wasn't the response that Mr. Aldrich wanted. I think that Recs and Park provided us with information today that is a little more head-scratching than even the response provided to Mr. Aldrich, and that is this reference to a longstanding policy again and again and again, when in fact there is no codification of that policy. There is no representation of that policy in anything except, in signs here and there. The notion that Wrexham Park believes it might be able to issue a citation based upon a policy which is neither codified nor posted anywhere is further troubling, and I think that is, I'll leave it at troubling. Now, whether this response was inadequate, I'm not sure. Whether this is an issue of whether records are maintained adequately at the Parks and Rec or at Wrexham Park is another question that I would be willing to entertain a response to. But I'd like to hear from other members of the complaint committee at this time.
Well, I'm frustrated to say the least. I would say at a minimum, due respect to Mr. Pawlowski, but your testimony strains credibility. The charter, I believe, section 4.104 requires that rules or regulations of departments be approved by commissions with jurisdiction on 10 days' notice. Rec Park certainly has rules and regulations governing the Marina Yacht Harbor. That came before the task force a couple of years ago, and certainly rules and regs governing other types of conduct in the parks. It, again, strains credibility to believe that there are no rules and regs governing use of parks and that they're simply ad hoc signs put up and that constitutes a restriction on conduct. I'm sure if I checked with the last two city attorneys that have advised Rec Park for significant periods of time, they would likely concur that Rec Park would have to have some basis for a restriction and would have to have that codified somewhere and not simply through, the oral tradition of somebody told me and somebody told them, and, a grandfather who worked in the park knew that we had a requirement to that end. I too am struggling as to whether there's a violation of sunshine here. There certainly was a timely response. If in fact there are no records responsive, then maybe that's it, and there's no violation of sunshine, but there certainly seems to be a problem with just not having codified regs. Rec Park isn't a new department. It's been around a long time, and other departments have detailed rules and regs, and it, again, seems unlikely, whatever the political climate or circumstances, whether it's bikes, natural areas, use of the amphitheater, whatever, it can certainly be a controversial policy, but it certainly ought to be codified. And so that's...
Right, okay. And Member Haynes, do you have any comment on this at the time?
No, I just think it's awkward that there's statements referencing to something that's not documented anywhere.
So I think that we have two opportunities with proceeding. Either we find that additional information was provided here and that information is that no regulation, no policy exists, that the only thing that exists is the signage, and that the signage must be obeyed because of Park Code Sections 3.02. And then we find no violation of sunshine. I think that's one option. I think the other option is to put this before the full task force and really interrogate what Wrexham Park means by this longstanding policy, which, again, reference was made to a policy again today that says that no bikes are allowed on earthen trails, or this distinction about inner circle trails. But why, if there is a policy that we heard reiterated twice tonight, if there is this policy, why was that policy not provided to the respondent? The only other qualification on that I'm interested in hearing, the remarks of my other members on this complaint committee is whether the recitation by Phil Ginsburg that longstanding regulations exist, that these are, whether that is a recitation of a policy, and if not, whether that's a recitation of a policy, whether that is enough, And then the question is sort of outside of sunshine. And then that question is whether there is a course of action to be taken against Parks and Rec in a different forum, to interrogate the validity of a policy that exists by word of mouth but does not exist in a codified format. So I think we have a little bit of room, and it depends on whether we think that it is fruitful and just to compel Rexon Park to dig a little deeper for where that policy originated and why that information was not provided to Mr. Aldrich.
I'd be interested in hearing public comment before deciding how to proceed.
Is there a motion? Are we going to make a motion at this time?
Why don't we take public comment on the whole item and then see where we go with it?
I suppose we can do that. Let's take public comment at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Hepner. It would be useful to be able to either speak for or against the motion, so this seems a little awkward.
Apologies.
But I would strongly encourage you to move this to the full task force and continue the discussion. I find it very disturbing that verbal regulations that are not documented on paper appear to be the modus operandi at Rec Parks, and Mr. Ginsburg needs to be told in no uncertain terms, since he's a lawyer, that he can't run a city department that way. And I think the full task force should have a good conversation about this case. Thank you.
Sorry, you already spoke in support.
I can't speak it publicly.
Yeah, but thanks.
Is there any other public comment at this time?
It's coming up.
Good afternoon. Relative to Park Code 3.02, about 8 years ago, I was walking in McLaren Park, and a sign had just been installed in the park. A 4x4, about 6 feet high, standing in a used tire with a sign at the top saying, "Bicycles must remain on paved roads." And I checked the regulations, and I saw that as far as vehicles are concerned, bicycles are exempted from the definition of vehicle because they are powered by human beings, so they're not technically a vehicle. I took a picture of it, and I went to Dennis Kern, and I said, "This just showed up in the park," and he looked at it, and he said, "Now, this is hearsay. This is what I'm telling you I saw, but from where I stand, it's almost gospel." He said, "I hate that code, and I wish they would stop using it," and that sign was taken down. And I agree with the man who spoke just before me that Rec Park should be running the department based on regulations. There are regulations, but along with this new regulation, unsubstantiated by any, no, it's not a regulation, a new policy with no regulations, the department is putting up these signs, and they are implementing new policy in opposition or contrary to existing regulations, and they are using 3.02. So there are no, I'm sorry, that's about it. The department has been abusing 3.02, and it is making policy without proper regulations, and it is ignoring regulations that already exist. Thank you.
Thank you. The other question that I have, is there any other additional public comment before I launch into a monologue? The only other question that I have is whether there is a public process for determining what goes on a sign, and I think we heard a non-answer to that tonight. And that, if policies and regulations and restrictions are being made on this sort of ad hoc basis of putting a sign up in a park, without any process or opportunity for public comment or for a community to weigh in on it, that's not a good way of going about, creating or enforcing regulations in our parks. I think it's a very dangerous system, and something, like not biking on earthen trails may seem innocuous to some. It's definitely not innocuous to others. It's troublesome to some. There are other regulations that I think are potentially more that have a broader spectrum of harm to the community that would necessitate a public process. That would we would want that as part of our system of engaging in our public emphasis on public parks. Yes.
I'm mindful of the time. I'm going to be late
Sure.
for another thing. Why don't I actually like the comment from Mr. Monette Shaw. Perhaps we should just refer this to the full task force without recommendation and just have a further hearing there.
I don't want to have a full hearing. I would rather give I would rather give some recommendation to the full task force of what we were thinking here than just bring it back all fresh and new. My thinking is that we make this a violation, a failure to respond to a public records request, and my thinking on that is because there's been this enunciation of a policy, of a longstanding policy, but because there was no record produced to support that policy, that's a violation, that's a failure to produce a record. And then that just compels Rex and Park to dig a little deeper to find out if there is a record that supports that policy. And if not, then there's a bigger problem. He says, Rex and Park is waving his head no right now, that there is no record. I think we've heard enough from the respondent and the complainant in this matter, and it's. I'm not going to make the motion, but if somebody else.
You want to go? I guess I can live with that. So I'll move that we that we recommend. Let me do along your lines and add a couple things. That we recommend finding a violation of 67.21B for failure to provide a copy of a record within 10 days. And add to that, perhaps in an eventual communication to Mr. Ginsburg and actually the Rec Park Commission in this case, concern about this ad hoc regulation of, frankly, all activity in parks through signage. And reference the charter section and say that rules and regulations in parks should be subject to a public process.
I think we may be exceeding our authority in that regard. If our issue is that there was no public process, then I think that we find a violation of the Sunshine Ordinance section pertaining to requirement that meetings be open and public. But I don't think that we can justifiably. I think we exceed our authority in finding a violation of the charter.
Well, I'm not finding a violation of the charter, but referencing that and suggesting that a public process is what is envisioned for rules and regulations governing conduct in departments. It is. And I'm not taking any position on bike riding one way or the other, natural areas one way or the other. All of these things are controversial, but that should be hashed out at commission meetings or at a public meeting prior to developing regs, and not just suddenly a sign goes up and you can't do something in a park.
Right.
That's not the way things are supposed to work. And if this case bears out that there's a problem in how things are being administered, I think we should communicate that concern to Rec Park and let them respond or not respond, whatever. But at least then we've got a basis for doing something. So that's my motion. If there's a second, we'll go ahead. If not, not.
I'll second that. And shall we take public comment on the motion? If there is any. I know we already allowed public comment on a non-motion. Since you already spoke, thanks. Okay, seeing no public comment, let's take a vote.
On the motion to find a violation of 67.21B with specific notes regarding rules and regulations and requirements of the charter. That would just be a side note, not part of the actual motion. It will be included as part of the recommendation. Member Pilpil.
Aye.
Pilpil, aye. Member Haynes.
Aye.
Haynes, aye. Chair Hepner.
Aye.
Hepner, aye. The motion passes.
And I wanted to be expressed in the recommendation to the task force too, and this is a piece of advice for parks or for Rex and Park, that really what I'm looking for and what I think the full task force will be looking for is a recitation of that policy somewhere. The repeated references to a longstanding policy, even before us today when we were interrogating whether there is a policy, and this affirmation that there is a policy without any documentation of it. I think if you could do a good search for where documentation of this longstanding policy is, that would be helpful for the full task force. Thank you. And I think that concludes item number 4.
Yes.
And let's move on to the next item on the agenda. And it's my understanding that the next 3 items are brought by the same complainant. The respondent, one of the respondents in each of the cases is the Mayor's Office of Housing and Community Development. I'm wondering if we might be able to hear these 3 items together. I'll make a motion that we do so and then hear public comment on it from the complainant. I'm interested in hearing from
Before you make a motion, can you not hear from me first?
I'm happy to hear from you. Yeah, either before or after there's a motion on the table.
Okay, before you make a motion, I'd rather that the motion be that you combine 52 and 54 as I initially submitted a single complaint that is on one issue. Mm-hmm. The other issue is only with MOHCD and involves separate matters. So I would
That's fine.
like to have
Why don't we do
53
5 and
as
7
one hearing and 52 and 54 combined.
That's fine.
Without objection, let's just do that.
Okay, and so we are going to proceed with items 5 and 7 first, and then we'll move to item 6 following items 5 and 7. At this point, the complainant has 5 minutes to address the complaint committee.
I would like to take a moment just to read them off.
Oh, yes, please. Thank you.
Item number 5, file number 15052, complaint filed by Patrick Minnick Shaw against Jay Hughes, Norm Nickens, Bob Shaw, and Victor Macros, Samson Employees Retirement System for allegedly violating Administrative Code Section 67.21, 67.25, and 67.29-7. Item number 7, file number 15054, complaint filed by Patrick Minnick Shaw against Olson Lee, Maria Benjamin, and Eugene Flannery, Mayor's Office of Housing and Community Development for allegedly violating Administrative Code Section 67.21, 67.25, and 67.29-7.
Move to find jurisdiction on both items 5 and 7.
Second, is there public comment on jurisdiction? No public comment. Let's take that without objection. And complainant now has 5 minutes to address the task force on.
Good. And in the interest of time, I'm not going to use my full 5 minutes. I'm going to try to get through this really rapidly.
You know how we listen, so.
Thank you. So just a summary of my initial complaint on April 18th and my rebuttal to both MOHCD and ERS's responses. I requested information from ERS on February 26th. And on March 15th, I then requested 2 Excel files of the data that they had sent me in PDF format on March 12th. As I indicated in my rebuttal, dated May 16th, responding to ERS's response and to MOHCD, as early as January 20th and January 22nd, you'll see in my rebuttal, which is on page 84 and 85 in your packet, 2 highlighted emails in which it shows that ERS's Bob Shaw and Richard Pickett had exchanged emails on as early as January 20th and January 22nd for the very same information that I had requested, and they had attached it in both Excel and Word formatted long before I had even asked for it. I asked for it, they gave it to me in PDF. They exist. Whether they converted it in-house at ERS, or if someone at ERS picked up the phone and called MOHCD and said, we have asked you in the past, we expect this data in Excel, can you please get it to us in Excel? Whether it was subsequently sent by MOHCD in Excel, and I just haven't been given that email, or if ERS converted it using a conversion package, they had it before I had asked for it. Deputy City Attorney Nicholas' instructional memo to you notes, one question is whether ERS coordinated with MOHCD to provide the files in native Excel format. So at issue is whether ERS picked up the phone and attempted to get the two Excel files from MOHCD, because they could not simply have jumped into PDF format from Excel all by themselves. So I would end my 5 minutes now asking that when you get to it, I would like you to look at my citations and remedies suggested in my original complaint and forward this to the full task force.
Thank you. Is there anybody present to provide facts or evidence on behalf of the complainant? Seeing none, the respondent now has an opportunity to address the full task force and, I'm sorry, this is not the full task force, this is the complaint committee. Do we have, who is present?
There's two departments.
There are two departments, right? And do we have a representative from each department?
Norm Nickens, Retirement System.
Okay, I'm going to allot 5 minutes for each of you to respond. You may need it, you may not, but please.
I'll take less than 5. Norm Nickens, I'm the board secretary to the Retirement Board. I'm here on behalf of the Retirement System. The other named individuals, Jay Ewish, Executive Director, is in a meeting. Bob Shaw, Managing Director for Public Markets, is in Alaska attending a funeral. And Victor Macris, Commissioner, is in Washington, D.C. attending a meeting. So I'm here on behalf of the Retirement System. Quickly going through this, we did receive a public records request from Mr. Monet Shaw that was sent out on the 26th at 9 p.m., which was a Thursday. We received it Friday morning. We responded the following Monday, indicating that we would conduct a complete review for documents and would get back to him no later than March 16th. We actually responded on March 10th in advance of when we said we would respond. His request was for all communications between Mr. Shaw and the Mayor's Office of Housing. We provided the entire email exchange, provided him with copies of all the documents. There were 2 attachments that were part of the documents that we received from Mayor's Office of Housing. There were 2 PDF files. They were sent to us in a PDF format. We provided them to Mr. Monet Shaw in a PDF format. He responded on the 15th, requesting the documents in an Excel format. We again responded to him, indicating that we had received the documents from the Mayor's Office of Housing by email. They came over as PDFs. We produced them as PDFs. That's it on the documents.
Okay, thank you. And then if we could have a representative of the Mayor's Office.
Ms. Hayward?
Good afternoon. Sophie Hayward from the Mayor's Office of Housing and Community Development. I actually prepared a little presentation that was in response to both requests, so I'm going to try to just address this item related to SFers and not the other, or I can combine them however you would prefer.
Do you mean in relation to both this item and item number 7?
I'm sorry.
Item number 6 is the one relating to all 3.
Yes, but that's okay. Basically, to summarize, I would like to say that we at MOCD do take our responsibilities under the Public Records Act and the Sunshine Ordinance very seriously. Regarding this particular request and immediate disclosure request, We responded, we provided the email with the attachment, which was a PDF, and I understand that that is frustrating because a PDF isn't searchable and sortable in the way that probably the complainant would have liked. Unfortunately, at this time, we cannot locate the Excel file. And so in order to provide an Excel file, we would have to take the information in the PDF and create an Excel file.
Okay.
I can't imagine that's a satisfying response, but I apologize. That's the truth.
I appreciate the honesty. So the issue really here, if I may just sort of boil it down to what seems to matter to the complainant, is whether the document should have been produced in Excel format. Am I correct in that understanding, Mr. Monette-Shaw, at this time?
I think so, but I didn't hear the response. Did they just say they can't find the Excel file?
That's correct. That's their contention.
Okay, so
but am I correct in sort of isolating that as the core issue?
The core issue is, I believe, under state law, files that are prepared electronically have to be provided in their native file format. If they're now saying that they can't find the file, somebody needs to start checking backup tapes and working with the Department of Technology to find the thing. Yes, the issue is I want it in native file format, and their weak-kneed excuse that they simply can't find it points to another violation of the Sunshine Ordinance, and that would be the one about maintaining records in a business-like manner, which applies not only to paper copies, but electronic files as well.
Ready?
Yeah. Member Pilpel?
Okay, so several things. Again, mindful of the time. It appears to me that retirement was timely in their response. It appears that MOH was not timely in their response. Sorry, or did that prompt you something?
I believe for this issue we were timely, though probably not complete in terms of the attach. We provided the document in the form that we had it, which was the PDF, but not the Excel. But I believe it was timely.
Maybe Mr. Monette-Shaw can comment. One of these, I think they acknowledged. Maybe it was the other one.
That's correct. It's the other one.
I apologize. Yes. Okay. So they were both timely responses. There's a lot of back and forth, and I tried to figure out the email. It's not clear to me that MOH actually sent an Excel spreadsheet to retirement. I don't know if they originally had it or not. Somebody at one of the agencies either transferred or retyped the stuff into a spreadsheet. It appears to be that it might have been Mr. Shaw or Pickett. Is that how you pronounce it, Mr. Pickett? Okay. Somebody ultimately needed to get it into Excel in order to futz with it, but it's not clear to me which agency originally had it. What does appear from this email that must have come from a third party is that there was an exchange between Mr. Shaw and Mr. Pickett that included some of the relevant files. So it appears to me that retirement probably has the file or files somewhere. If MOH can't find them, I'm sorry, somewhere somebody's got the files in Excel. And I think it's only the Excel files that was an issue right now. As to the specific requests, I read the request somewhat narrowly, that it was a request for emails. The emails were provided, the attachments to the emails were provided, and they were provided in the format that they existed. The subsequent request for the attachments in their native format was a fine request, but the department may not have had it in their native request, just looking to the attachment to that email. What they could have done is looked elsewhere to find in their servers or whatever, just DALP or FR DALP, whatever, and see what Excel files turned up. I don't know if that occurred or not. I don't know if MOH did that. I don't know if retirement did that. Maybe we could hear more about that. I'm just kind of interested at the end of the day in finding out who's got the Excel files, getting them to Mr. Monette Shaw, and being done with this. I don't know that there needs to be a whole lot more here. There could be, certainly. So perhaps my question...
Yeah, I'm sort of in agreement with you. And if the representative from Retirement Services could come up for a moment.
And if you don't know, that's cool, but let's find out.
Again, we received the documents from the Mayor's Office of Housing in a PDF format. It is possible to take a PDF document and save it into an Excel format. You completely screw the formatting, but we'd be happy to do that for Mr. Shaw if he would like, or for Mr. Monet Shaw if he'd like.
Right, and there ought to be some, fairly cheap or freeware program for converting a PDF to
It really
a
is
CL.
as simple as just saving a document format. I mean, he could do it, we can do it. You take the document you have as a PDF, and you simply save it as an Excel document. Again, you're going to screw the formatting to hell.
So
but we'd be happy to do that.
The PDF that was provided, though, is a text searchable PDF. Which I think is how it would have to be, right? If you have to.
I would have to go back to look at the document that we received, the original PDF that we received.
Okay.
I've only seen paper copies, so I'm hesitant to say that.
Okay, can I just interject?
Wait, before you do that. This email on January 22nd from Bob Shaw to Richard Pickett that has the attachments in Excel. Has that email been deleted? That appears to be an email that would not need to be provided by the Mayor's Office of Housing to you. This is an email from Bob Shaw to Richard Pickett, which means that it's in Bob Shaw's outgoing, sent file on his
I can check
email.
on that, but that again would not be. The request was for communications between Mr. Shaw and the Mayor's Office of Housing. Doesn't fall into that definition.
Right. Okay.
Understood. And that was my follow-up. Could you somehow, whether we order it or if we can just ask you, can you check with Mr. Shaw and Mr. Pickett and find out in whatever drives they've got stuff for whatever Excel spreadsheets they have with DALP somewhere in the title? DALP November, list of outstanding loans, paid off loans.
Happy to do that with the caveat that is not the request
That was
we
not
received.
the original request, but we're
to do
clarifying
that.
the follow-up so that maybe we can find the file, get it to Mr. Monette Shaw, and be done. Cool? Okay.
My only hesitation, well, not hesitation, the only additional information I would add to that is Mr. Shaw is currently out of town and will be out of the country until the 29th of June, so be happy to conduct the search upon his return.
Can you check with Mr. Pickett in the meantime?
Mr. Pickett is actually a retiree who works part-time on an as-needed basis through the retirement system. I would have to verify when he's next in the office.
Member Haynes, do you have...
I was just going to suggest if you guys have an IT department, I have a history in working in IT. I've searched mail servers on behalf of different level of personnel. Your IT provider would be able to search that inbox.
What I can probably do that would be fastest would be I can email Mr. Shaw. He has access to his email remotely. He can forward the document back to me, and then I can either produce that document or convert the existing PDF file into an Excel format.
Okay.
With, again, no guarantees as to formatting once we do that.
Can I just follow up with Mr. Monette Shaw? Can we be specific here? I was sort of asking for any Excel file that they've got with DALP in the title. Is it the November or December? Is it the paid off? Is it the list of active loans? Which thing are you looking for?
Can I interject here? Are we going to get to my rebuttal period?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay, because I am disturbed by a number of things being said in response to your question.
And I'm confident that I share a lot of your own reservations about why this has not already been done and whether this was actually requested or not. To me, actually, it appears it was actually requested.
So listen.
Use the mic.
Is this a rebuttal time or?
We have not started.
Member Pelpa had a specific question.
Period at this time.
To answer your question, I want those files that are named as attachments. I don't want them to creatively search for DALP
Okay.
and give me whatever they have.
Okay.
So is it
I
just
I want the 2 Excel files on that January 22nd or January 20th email.
Okay, that's different from the other reference documents. That's not list of DLP paid off loans or 1998 to 2013 list of DLP active loans.
All right, so I agree with you. I want the ones that had the footer, the one from MOHCD had a footer. I want that file in Excel. And I also want the 2 Excel files that were attached between ERS employees. So there's 3 of them that I want.
Okay.
And if they can find the 4th file that was sent that did not have a file name in the footer, I want that one too. I want all 4 of them.
Okay, now I'm just confused as to whether these were specifically requested yet.
Yeah. I'm finding this as list of DALP paid off loans with the footer with the file name 1998 to 2013 list of DALP active loans. That was the first thing. List of DALP repayment loans November 2013, list of DALP active loans December 2013, and if they can find it, active DALP loans as of 12/31/2013.
That did not have a footer in the file name.
Correct.
Okay, so
all of which is documented in page 260 and 271. Okay.
Were all 4 files specifically requested? I think that the acknowledgement of the request of these 2 is, substantiates that they were actually requested.
Those were requested, and these 2 were not, but were disclosed in some third-party fashion. And Mr.
In a PDF file?
No.
In response to some other thing, but Mr. Monette-Shaw is asking for them now, and we're trying to facilitate that.
So are we going to my rebuttal now?
Why don't we, if you want to rush into your rebuttal and end our fact-finding mission, we can do that. So, Mr. Monette-Shaw, why don't we do your rebuttal, and we'll cut it short.
I appreciate Member Haynes mentioning that he has an IT background. I also work for the city. I am here as a private citizen, and I have, over my 16 years working for the city, have repeatedly, inadvertently deleted documents, and I turn immediately to my IT support staff, and they yank them off backup tape. They should be ordered by this task force, when you refer the matter to the full task force, to search their backup tapes and or to search DT backup tapes. Those emails with the attachments exist somewhere. Or if the Excel files were inadvertently deleted, they can be recovered. To answer your particular question, no, I did not ask explicitly yet for the 2 attachments on the January 20th and January 22nd emails exchanged between ERS staff. But the Sunshine Ordinance, the spirit of the Sunshine Ordinance indicates that if they have to coordinate between departments to locate records, they also have to coordinate with their own staff to find out if their staff already has them in a different format. So they had those 2 Excel files in January before I asked for them. They can find them. They can find them in Shaw's email. They can find them in Pickett's email. They can find them on a server somewhere. Theoretically, they are still using those files to perform due diligence about handing the mayor an investment from my pension funds, and they can't possibly finish a due diligence analysis at ERS without those files. They have to exist somewhere. They do exist somewhere. And if and I disagree with Mr. Nickens' contention that you can just save as a PDF file to Excel format. I have never seen on the PDF file menu under the drop-down arrow for save as that it will do a conversion in a save as step. I don't think it exists. And I've been working with computers for 30 years myself. I know about those drop-down save as selection lists. And I think Mr. Mickens is absolutely dead wrong on that point. And I would like to repeat, this needs to go to the full task force, and an additional charge brought against MOHCD for not maintaining files in a business-like manner.
Thank you. And the respondent now has an opportunity for a rebuttal, and if you guys can just take turns.
I will, of course, defer to Mr. Monet Shaw's computer expertise and knowledge on how we should conduct our due diligence. However, in regard to the documents he's requested, I'm more than happy to go back and take a look at the 2 PDFs that we received, look to see if it is possible to convert them into Excel format, again, with no guarantees on how formatting will be impacted. I'll also be happy to go back and look at the email exchange between Mr. Shaw and Mr. Pickett that was not subject to the original request, and be happy to produce any documents that may be contained there.
Thank you. And the representative from the mayor's office.
Hi, this is Sophie Hayward again from the Mayor's Office of Housing. I, too, am happy to go back and try again to find the Excel version of the PDF attachment that we provided in the timely fashion. Certainly, I apologize for the confusion about this.
Thank you.
Further discussion?
Yes. Further discussion, Member Pilpel.
So based on the representations from the departments that they're going to do a further search, that's good, that's helpful, I appreciate that. If in your search you find, again, anything else that's related to DALP, that would be helpful. So I'm not going to require that. I'm not going to define, Well, I think what Mr. Monet Shaw was looking for is something related. It's very specific in page 260, I believe. The 157 rows in the one and 391 rows in the other. What are
Those are 2 files, and I do not want them searching for
other things? Yeah, okay.
Because it could be hundreds of files. I am not here on a fishing expedition.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, and to that point, let's just stay within the bounds of the, I understand this is not one of these. Let's just keep it within the bounds of the complaint and not impose additional obligations that are not, pertaining to documents that were not requested.
So it's the list of the active loans and the repayment loans. Those are more likely available than not. I'm still not finding or feeling a violation by either department in response to the complaint. I think they met their requirements, and this is just sort of teasing out and a follow-up request, really. But I'm not.
Well, a follow-up request is a request, is it not?
Well, it's a clarification or a subsequent request. But I think on the initial request and on the facts that were presented to us, it seems to me that the departments complied. They did a diligent search. They provided the records that they had. Unfortunately, the attachment that Mr. Monet Shaw is looking for in Excel was not an attachment. The attachment to the email was a PDF. It would be nice if it could be found in Excel. It would be nice if it could be converted as a secondary thing, but the email itself, the attachment to the email itself was a PDF, and it was provided on a timely basis. So it seems to me that there's not a violation.
The information requested, when you say that the documents requested were in a PDF, you're talking about the 2 documents that were actually requested, not the attachments to emails. Mr. Monet Shaw, please let us discuss this for a moment. I'm sure we're going to come to an understanding very soon, and then we'll have a motion. I just want to move through this quickly. So there's an obligation under the California
Public Records Act?
Public Records Act to produce documents in an electronic format in which they exist. There's no reference to native format. It's the electronic format in which they exist. So your contention is that they existed in a PDF, they were produced in that format, ergo no violation.
Right, and I think what we're trying to do now is, in further understanding the request, is to try to get it in an alternate format, if it exists, to facilitate Mr. Monette Shaw's use, which is great.
And I requested in my original request in January an Excel file. They had it when I requested it.
Mr. Monette Shaw.
My God, Mr. Monette Shaw, point of order. Can we just keep this, concise, please? I know what you requested. We've heard the testimony on both sides. It'd behoove us to come to a conclusion soon. Member Haynes, what do you think about this?
I'm kind of inclined to agree that the original request seems to have been satisfied, and what we seem to be listening to now is a clarification on that request that, from what I'm hearing, at least so far, that he really would prefer to have it in Excel version. It seems clear that this document is available somewhere. It just seems to be a matter of locating it and producing it in a timely manner, considering the revision of this request. You've already read the emails requesting it, and unless it actually says, if you want to read it again, Excel document. I mean, if it says Excel document in that email, then it's clear at that point that he wanted it from that point as an Excel document and only as an Excel document. But if it doesn't say that, then it seems clear that the original request seems to have been satisfied.
It has not.
The question, Mr. Monette Shaw, please. This is not your opportunity for testimony. We're not asking follow-up questions right now. You've had a rebuttal, have you not? Has there been rebuttals yet?
I asked for Excel. I
Mr.
got PDF.
Monette Shaw, we know the facts of the case. We know the facts of the case. This is not helping us. The question, I don't see that God, it makes it a lot easier if they're not momentary outbursts and a free-for-all. We conduct things in an orderly manner here, and it's been the same way for a long time. Now, even if he requested something in Excel format, I'm not sure that the Mayor's Office of Housing has an obligation to produce it in that format. They have to produce it in the format in which it exists. They're saying that it does not exist in Excel format. However, they have agreed to search for it in the Excel format or to convert it to an Excel format and to provide it to you. This would be sort of the middle of the road where maybe I'm feeling that my colleagues here are not feeling a violation. I'm a little bit up in the air, but inclined to agree with the majority on this and be satisfied that the Mayor's Office of Housing and Retirement Services are going to, do a further search for an Excel spreadsheet or to produce it to you anyway. That is the way that we can satisfy the spirit of the Sunshine Ordinance while not necessarily finding a violation because the response was in under the strict reading of the Sunshine Ordinance and the Brown Act and the Public Records Act compliant. So, is there a motion on the table?
I'll make a motion to recommend to the full task force that we not find a violation, but as part of the recommendation to codify that request to both retirement and MOH to do a further search and provide such spreadsheet if they can find it or explain that they haven't, either way.
And I want to be clear as to whether this is an obligation on behalf of the Mayor's Office or a recommendation that they do so.
Recommendation or request?
A request.
Request from the task force that would facilitate resolving the complaint.
Okay. Is there a second to that motion?
A second.
Okay. Is there any public comment on that motion?
I think I can't comment, right?
Not as the complainant, no.
I'm Amy Selva Johnson, and I think that the task force, you need to look at Sunshine Ordinance and to, try to build buildings that are standable and that don't look like they're going to last for 2 or 3 days. That this ordinance of not getting records and stuff, just what happened in 2006 in the police department area, not in the task force, but this is a piece that love and caring that people that are aware that there is peace and love and caring about our organizations that we do today in our task force. That I have a little things that are very discriminating to my past, and 9/11 don't quit, and I'm sick and tired of being put to blame for those research I can't, get involved with. But this will change, in different areas, because I'll make sure that these things don't happen again. I've been there and not going past it. Terrible disaster that's been doing to this police department and the city and county and the San Francisco medical things. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Can I just?
Yes, Member Pilpel?
I don't think there's any other public comment.
Seeing no other public comment.
Is that Mr. Flannery? Did you have anything to share?
Not at this time, thank you.
Okay, nice to see you. Now would be a good time if the departments have any concerns about the motion, if it's not clear.
What about my concerns?
Well, yeah, I'm not sure what we're doing right now, Mr. Member Pilpel.
I just want to be...
Why do they get special treatment?
Mr. Monette Shaw, let us hash this out for a second. Member Pilpel, what's your intent here? Was there ambiguity about it?
I just want to be clear that there's no ambiguity, so that our request is clear to make the search, and I'm not sure that there was that.
This matter is going to come before the full task force for a full hearing with our recommendation. It would be extremely beneficial if the documents were produced in the Excel format. That way there will be absolutely no reason for a conflict before the full task force unless, somebody wants to dig up the issue of, other issues.
I just want to state it's not for a full hearing. It's going to be a recommendation.
But so it's not a full hearing, though the full task force does have the option of rejecting our recommendation.
And scheduling a full hearing at a future date, yes.
Thank you.
One very quick technical question. In the response that we draft, I'm assuming I'm sending the response to Mr. Young with a copy to Mr. Monette Shaw.
That would be excellent. And if you can send Mr. Monette Shaw the files, that would be fantastic.
Thank you.
And we'd like to clarify, is July 1st too soon for this, or should we refer this to the August 5th meeting of the Sunshine Ordinance Task Force?
Is July 1st is 2 weeks to produce these Excel files? Understanding that it would be beneficial for them to be produced in that time, is that doable?
That was the type of clarification I was...
Okay.
I do not anticipate a problem meeting a July 1st deadline with the caveat that Mr. Shaw currently is in Alaska attending a funeral, and after that he leaves for Hong Kong. I should be able to reach him by email. We should be able to conduct our business by email. If there's any delay, I'll let you know as soon as possible.
Okay, Mr. Monette Shaw, are you going to be available for a hearing on July 1st?
Absolutely, and this has been going on since January. It should not drag into August.
So, understood, Mr. Monette Shaw.
Okay, just to reiterate, the motion is to find that the task force recommends that no violation has occurred. However, they are requesting that the department perform an additional search and provide the documents requested in Excel format if possible. This matter will be scheduled as a recommendation before the Sunshine Ordinance Task Force at their July 1st meeting.
Thank you.
Just so you know, when I do this as a recommendation, the parties are invited but are not required to attend that meeting.
Thank you. And if we could take a vote then on this motion?
Yes. Member Pilpel.
Aye.
Pilpel, aye. Member Haynes.
Aye.
Haynes, aye. Chair Hepner.
Aye.
Hepner, aye. The motion passes. Next on the agenda is item number 6, file number 15053, complaint filed by Patrick Monette Shaw against Olson Lee, Maria Benjamin, Eugene Flannery, and the Mayor's Office of Housing and Community Development for allegedly violating Administrative Code Section 67.21, 67.24A1, 67.25A, 67.26, 67.27A, and 67.29-7A for failure to respond to immediate disclosure requests in a timely and/or complete manner.
Motion to find jurisdiction.
Second, is there any public comment on the motion to find jurisdiction? Seeing none, if we can move on without objection. And the complainant now has 5 minutes to address the complaint committee.
I would like to apologize to Mr. Nickens. When I filed this complaint on April 15th, I made a clerical error just under the salutation, Dear Mr. Young, on the complaint against which department. I should have deleted ERS and included only MOHCD. That's the only named people responsible in this document. On January 19th, I placed 3 separate records requests to MOHCD Director Olson Lee via Mr. Flannery for information on 3 separate MOHCD programs. On January 27th, Flannery responded providing a single file he claimed were responsive to my 3 January 19th records requests and also a 4th records request that I had placed on January 22nd. Oddly, Flannery asserted my 3 records requests amounted to interrogatories, not records requests, which is completely false. The single Excel file that you will see a sample of on page 165 in your packet that he provided me was not responsive to the 3 separate records requests. And I can give you greater detail on why not, including the redacted items that you can see clearly on page 165 show only a handful of the first responder loans that is in a different layout than earlier Excel files that they provided me way back in 2014. Mr. Flannery indicated that all of my questions could be answered by this single Excel file. He's wrong. It's inconceivable to me that they do not maintain separate Excel files. If you look on pages 109 and 118 in your packet, that would be the 2 Excel files from the previous complaint you just completed. And if you look on pages 165, 172, and 173 in your packet, there are other Excel file formats, layouts that they maintained back in 2014. I don't for a minute believe that they suddenly stopped maintaining them in those other file layouts because they're components of the first responder DULP program as opposed to the regular DULP program or as opposed to the Teacher Next Door loan program, who all have different applicants, different constituencies, and different processes, and I dare say different column heading requirements or fields to qualify for each of these various kinds of loans. Flannery's response that they only had a single file is comical. MOHCD has provided me directly with another file by another employee whose name I did not bring along with me today. They maintain lots and lots of different Excel files. And if you look at my rebuttal, I clearly point out to you in the right-hand column why Flannery's responses make no sense. The file he provided me does not provide budget information. He claims that the maximum loan amounts for the first responders and non-first responders are in that single Excel file. They are not. And belatedly, they sent along program files, which I had already had, but they do not specifically answer some of my questions from the original request. I wanted updated data showing how many firefighters, police officers, and sheriff's deputies had applied for the first responder loans. They provided that level of detail to me in early January 2014. I was asking for an update. And I am venturing a guess, they still maintain a separate Excel file of applicants from each of the three public safety departments before they move them on to a list of people who have been awarded loans.
Thank you, Mr. Monette-Shaw. Is there anybody present to provide facts or evidence on behalf of the complainant? Seeing nobody, the respondent now has 5 minutes to address the complaint committee.
Hi there, it's Sophie Hayward from the Mayor's Office of Housing and Community Development. Let's see. Again, I will reiterate that we take the responsibilities, and particularly Mr. Flannery has worked very hard to fulfill our responsibilities under the Public Records Act and the Sunshine Ordinance. And our office has worked to respond to a number of requests made by Mr. Monette-Shaw, particularly in January and January through March of this year of 2015. All of that is summarized in your packet. And first, I want to acknowledge and apologize for the delayed response to Mr. Monette-Shaw's January 19th immediate disclosure request, in which we responded in 8 days rather than having responded within the required 24 hours. That was a mistake, and we acknowledge that and apologize for that. I just want to be very clear about that. And then after this, I want to address some of the issues around the specific data requests in early 2015. I suspect that our efforts to provide a thorough response in a timely fashion resulted in responses that were accurate but also likely frustrating in that it was a very large Excel spreadsheet that included an enormous amount of information. We essentially provided the raw data as well as references to general procedures outlined in the manuals that govern the various programs. This is in contrast to information that we provided in early 2014 in response to a records request made by Mr. Monette-Shaw. In response to that request, a staff member took it upon themselves to answer each question by culling the information from the master Excel spreadsheet and creating a new document to respond to him. We didn't have, as I understand it, there wasn't sufficient time to do that level of culling and creating a new document in response in this set of responses. So we instead sent the full raw data. And then there were a number of follow-up questions. And in those responses, we provided links to various manuals to help guide through the very large Excel spreadsheet that we sent. I do understand that getting an enormous amount of data can also be frustrating. So just to summarize that, we make an effort to provide accurate and complete information in a timely fashion, but as you know, and I'm sure you've heard from many departments here, we're also balancing the workload involved in providing the responses requested with our staff's regular work program. So that concludes my presentation. I'm available for questions, but of course, maybe more pertinent, Mr. Flannery is here as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And does Mr. Flannery want to use any time in the first 5 minutes to address?
Thank you.
Or, why don't we just, do you have facts or evidence that you would like to provide in support of the respondent? Maybe this is a better opportunity for you to address us at this time.
Well, thank you. We did construct that first spreadsheet in 2014 in response to specific questions. And the spreadsheet we sent to the January 2015 is our central spreadsheet for all the housing programs. And our feeling is that to alter that spreadsheet in response to specific request is to alter a public document. So what was given to Mr. Monette-Shaw is essentially our database of loans. So it was made in the best interest of complying with the law and providing unadulterated data.
Thank you. The matter is now with the complaint committee. Member Popo.
I'm sorry, same thing from earlier. Let me be clear. Ms. Hayward, are you sort of the sunshine person over at MOH?
No, thank you. I am not the sunshine person.
Would you like to be?
No, we have Mr. Flannery.
Okay. So,
I'm Sophie Hayward. I'm the Director of Policy and Legislative Affairs.
okay.
So I report to Olson.
Okay.
To Mr. Lee.
That's like the old Melange position from 1,000 years ago.
It's been many different things
Okay,
over
got it.
time.
Okay, so your policy and whatnot, you're helping facilitate. You
I usually work on liaison work with other
got it.
departments.
Okay, and Mr. Flannery, are you the primary sunshine person over there? Lucky you. Congrats. Okay, so I get that the 2014 response was pulled and futzed with, okay, and that you're not required to do it, but you did that there, and so the expectation then was that you could do it again, and you weren't because too many questions and blah, blah, blah. I think, I guess we might have to walk through the table, maybe, maybe not, I don't know. I think at a minimum what would have been helpful in your January 27th response is to acknowledge that there was a big database, and it's not clear if you also attached the relevant manuals, but maybe another line that says if you need assistance in interpreting some of this, please let me know. You know.
We understand that oversight, and I apologize.
Okay. I mean, if you're suggesting, or if I'm interpreting here, that you were trying to provide the information and it's all sort of there, but it may not be obvious to all of us how to pull it. If I'm looking at page, 165, which shows the big spreadsheet, it would seem to me that the fields that were redacted due to the public safety officer procedural bill of rights 832.7 blah blah blah. That could have been made more clear. For example, you have a more generic explanation for the redactions in your January 27th response, and something that the entire spreadsheet, which I don't know how many lines are in it, could certainly be sorted to, to isolate individual programs. So if, and again, I'm sort of interpreting here, if one's interested in the FRDALP as opposed to the ABC, whatever, the whole alphabet soup over there, that you could sort of isolate that program and look at those particular lines in there. That isn't necessarily obvious. I guess I need to hear a little more as to perhaps the table or some other way to determine if the information provided was actually responsive to the request. I know you're asserting that it was. Mr. Monette-Shaw is suggesting that it wasn't. We need to sort of work through that quickly.
Yeah, I agree. And to distinguish at the same time between raw data that is being provided and the creation of new documents that may not exist.
Yeah, and even if, let me be clear, there isn't a requirement to create new documents. We understand that. I don't think that prohibits a department from taking a big fat spreadsheet and isolating a portion and saying, to assist you, we have isolated and are just providing what you wanted out of a big fat database. I don't think there's anything that prohibits you from doing that. You're not required to, and depending on the circumstances, that may be just, the best solution. But if you didn't have time or blah, 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 if you're instead providing a big fat database, I think then you have sort of an implied obligation to explain more how to find it, because it suggests otherwise that you're burying things and, one can't find the needle in the haystack. So, however, either side want to walk through what the request was and whether or not it was responsive. I don't know how we do that otherwise.
Well, I'm just looking at
the table or some other way?
The table, yeah. The table, there, it appears in one iteration at page 183 of the packet.
Right.
I'm sorry, what?
Page 183 of the packet.
And page 168 is Mr. Monette-Shaw's response.
I was hoping you'd focus
183 and 168?
Yeah. All right, so I'm going to need to look at them too.
You got a better way?
Nope, let's just go through it and hash out where there's a disagreement. Page
168
1.
and 183.
You mean on my responses in my rebuttal?
Your responses appear at 168 of the packet in your rebuttal to respondent MOHCD. And this is your letter of May 16th, 2015. And in fact, let's use that because it actually does show the MOH's response. And thank you, by the way, to the complainant, Mr. Monette Shaw, for organizing it in this fashion. It does make it a lot more comprehensible where there are disagreements between the mayor's office and yourself.
So where are you starting? Can you...
Page 168 of the packet.
All right, I don't have your packet in front of me. What I have is my table, and if you...
That's what your letter of May 16th that has your table in it.
Your table.
Just refer in there to the request number in the left-hand margins.
1A.
1A.
Let's start with 1A.
What's your question?
They
contend it was responsive. You say it is absolutely non-responsive. Notably, enclosure 1 to this rebuttal shows an apparent Excel tracking file titled response sent blah, 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 that Mr. Flannery provided me on January 13th, 2014, showing that up to 10 first.
Okay, so...
Can you break this down?
Let me break that down. By cross-referencing you to this single, quote, database that they provided me in Excel. There's a sample of that on page 165 in your packet.
So,
and wait a minute, and if you look at, I don't know, page 9 in my, I'm sorry, in my original complaint, I mention that this illustration, I'm sorry, yeah, it's page 165 in your packet, is my April 18th initial complaint to the task force. And you'll notice that at the bottom, under that illustration, I tell you that it's got 207 rows, i.e. loans, in that file. They're saying it's the complete database. That can't possibly be, because the earlier case you just concluded, there were 391 outstanding loans. How can this database with 207 rows be the complete database if they've told at ERS that there are 391 outstanding loans, and the mayor's press release on June 10th said that they've issued 1,000 loans? So how can a file that's got 207 loans in it possibly be complete?
This is the single family, right? Is it possible that this is filtered, that this is a subset of the total loans?
Well, if it's single family, then they're not providing me with any kind of data about the first responder loans. And I'll tell you why. Because if you look on page 165, that file has simply redacted 4 first responder loans.
On that page, that screenshot.
No. That's the entire file. I can guarantee you, Mr. Pilpo, that the entire file has only 4 rows of any redacted data.
I believe you. So can I ask Mr. Flannery a question? Could I interpret from that of the 10 loans that were projected, only 4 got to this stage in the first responder DALP as opposed to the other programs within MOH?
That's absolutely correct.
Okay. So
if the loans don't go through, they're done. We don't transfer the data.
Okay. So in answer to the how many of the 10 planned loans were actually issued by June 2014, that might be 4 or fewer.
Yes.
Okay. And that's how one gets from what you had to what you got, but I
also asked how many of the 10 loans that they had told me about last January had been carried forward.
And where would one find that in the spreadsheet?
Well, it's not going to be on this spreadsheet.
Well, they're saying that it is, so let's have them show us where.
Unfortunately, Maria Benjamin's on vacation, and And so the data is in the spreadsheet.
Okay. Are there dates in one of these columns that's relevant?
Believe me, there's about 60
Mr. Monette Shaw.
columns in that.
I believe you, so we're asking them to explain. Some of the columns are hidden here.
So I think Mr. Monette Shaw even answers this question in his rebuttal. He says on January 21st, Flannery also noted in a follow-up email response that of the 12 applicants, 10 qualified for a reservation of funds, 2 are on a waiting list, 6 have yet to secure properties and have asked for it. So we did answer that.
In 2014, I was asking for an update.
Mr. Shaw, will you please have a seat while we're taking...
Let me ask it a slightly different way. Mr. Flannery, maybe Ms. Howard, does MOH have some kind of annual report that summarizes all of the various programs and sort of the transactions globally? So you could say, this program, we allocated $2 million, we went through 10 loans and blah, 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 and all these people are living in happy homes. Does such a document exist? I'm just wondering.
We have an annual report that is posted on our website that is accurate through the fiscal year through June 30th of 2014.
Does it have some of the information I was suggesting?
It has a limited amount of information. The Housing Trust Fund was implemented in January of 2013, so at that point, by June 30th of 2014, not many of the Housing Trust Fund dollars were expended on loans, but I do want to say that while we have an annual report posted for fiscal year 2013-14,
the next one,
prior to that, we had a long gap of
not
annual reports that had not been published. We will have another annual report that will be published by December 31st of this year to cover the next fiscal year.
And could I just suggest, it's not going to be in a motion, but just suggest that as part of that annual report, to the extent that you can capture sort of program performance.
There's a data appendix, absolutely.
Okay, that would be cool, and maybe some of the requests here might work their way into how you think of presenting the data. There's a lot of dollars, there's a lot of loans, there's a lot of issues, but the better you can sort of explain what's working, what's not, with numbers, with narrative, whatever, an annual report is a great way to do that.
That has already proved useful to respond to requests that are covered by the time period of the report.
And I'm sure Mr. Monette Shaw will be interested in that annual report when it's available. Okay. I'm sorry. Was there... So that was an example on item 1. So are we good with that?
What I maintain is that they have some sort of reservation.
Please use the mic.
That
the microphone, please.
They apparently have some kind of reservation or waiting list. It's a lottery, remember? So if they cull through applications and put somebody on a lottery list, how does it move on to this master database list?
Great question.
Without tracking who is being carried forward to the next fiscal year as an eligible applicant?
Great question. Is there a separate waiting list?
The way that I understand that the system works is that you apply for the loan, you qualify for the loan, and then if something falls through and you don't secure the property, for example, then you don't get the loan. If you then it's obviously not given, and then you're not on a held over list after that. So we don't open up a lottery for available down payment assistance loans. People apply, they get them, and then they can use them on a property or not. Because
That's
what
fine.
happens is
what I'm asking is there a separate reservation list or waiting list? Yes? No.
My understanding is that there is not a separate reservation or waiting list. We do not maintain a wait list.
So everybody who's in the program, whatever that means, are on the spreadsheet. There's one master list for everybody, and it's like you get to a certain point, and either you continue and you get the money, or you don't, and that's it. But everybody's on the list. You don't fall out of the master list.
That is correct. And there are a number of people, however, who have gotten fairly far through the process, and then something falls through with the transaction. And so there could be a strange moment of time when you have qualified for the loan, you're proceeding with the purchase of a property, and something falls through, and then you're not.
But do you stay on the list even though you haven't gotten to the end
My understanding is that once it falls through and you're out of contract with that property, for example, then no, you do not stay on the list. There's
So
not a
how would
pool.
one know how many people fell out of the system in that way?
I think we would need to see who applied for loans, who qualified for loans, and then who actually originated loans, and then that delta would be who fell off. Does that make sense?
So then is there a separate list of people who applied that you can then compare to who actually got, and then the difference is the delta?
I'm not aware of a list that we keep of people who applied and then didn't get
So
loans.
how would
later.
one figure that out? That's what sorry.
I can look into it and get back to you.
Maybe Mr. Flannery's got a thought.
The data we keep is pretty much set by the regulatory structures that fund our programs. So, and our administrative funds are geared towards reporting that kind of compliance. So we're required to keep that certain kinds of data depending upon the program. And so that is what is reflected in our spreadsheets. If it's not required to be kept, it may not be kept until someone raises the issue of keeping it. So if it's not in our system, it's because we're not required to keep it, and we're not being paid by the funding agencies to keep it.
Fair enough. All right, so I guess maybe the follow-up there is if you might explore a way to take someone who falls apart because their grandmother died in Maryland and they couldn't buy the house here, blah, 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 to make a note and no longer participating in the program and move them to another place, but not delete them completely, because then you'd have to go to the paper records and compare and pain in the butt. So
Absolutely. A good example is the CalVet loans, because they're not compliant with the city's BMR program. So they apply and they inevitably fall off.
Let's not talk about Diamond Heights and all of that stuff. Okay, never mind. Yes, I got it.
So as to 1A, does that provide additional information to you, Mr. Monette-Shaw, about, I mean, it's your contention that this other list must exist. It appears that it does not. Is that?
I'm sorry, what?
Your understanding that there's a separate reservation list and a separate waiting list, that those lists must exist, that it appears that they do not.
All right. And I was led to believe by Mr. Flannery that single file would answer all of my questions. And I don't see any column headings up there that clearly and intuitively indicate that somebody has applied but didn't get a loan.
Right, and it appears that's because the people who did not get the loan were in fact deleted from the list before, and were not, they were simply deleted from the list. They weren't moved to a different list of people who applied and did not get the loan. They were simply deleted from. So that would right? I mean, I think, and that would fall under then a category of information that is not maintained by them.
And maybe my earlier suggestion to create a new place for it, maybe a better thing is to just keep them on the master list and just in a notes column somewhere explain, moved away, no longer qualify, whatever the story is, and then that's it. So they're still on there, right? It's like they got in, but they didn't get to the end. And there's a story, there's a reason.
It seems like it's something that would be data that's easy enough to keep, but because there's no need for them to keep it internally, and because they were not, that they just don't keep it. That's not data that's relevant to their operation, nor are they required to keep it for some regulatory purpose.
And this isn't thousands, this is like tens or hundreds a year, right? Yeah, all right.
So
that's 1A.
Right. I think that satisfies 1A to my understanding, is that the data that you're looking for does not exist, that they don't keep that. So if we're to move to 1B...
Well, wait, just to close 1A, that speaks to the fact that the civil grand jury said, when they issued their report, that the record keeping in an MOHCD sucks. We can move to 1B if you'd like.
Your frustration is not, unfounded necessarily. It's just, that's just the way it is, and I it's not for us. I don't perceive
either.
Nor do I perceive this as them failing to keep records in a sufficient manner. As to 1A. Now, 1B is another story. So the records requested were data on which public safety department personnel received loans. They produced this Excel spreadsheet, this loan tracking single-family copy. Your contention is that the spreadsheet is non-responsive because there's no column listing which public safety department's loan recipients worked in.
They redacted the name, and, if I had the name, frankly, once they get a loan from the city, they have a contract with the city. They can't redact the name, even if they are public safety officers, I don't believe. Okay,
so the redaction aside, we're talking about a different column that says public safety departments, right? That's what you're looking for, a
right,
separate
and there's
column
no
that says
such
public-
column. And I cannot for a minute believe, Chair Hepner, that if it was Greg Sorg or Gary Gelagnis or Marty Halloran over at PO8 comes ringing MOHCD's doorbell and says, so how many of my first responders applied for this loan program? They're going to say, I don't know, go ask civil grand jury?
So
let's ask
Mr. Flannery,
for those 4 that are redacted, which are presumably people in the FR, LAD, whatever, DALP, which departments, is there a column that tells us which department they're hanging out with?
The information about the source of the loan would be obtained from a row. If you read across, what one has to do is go across each row and each column, and you have to make some, you have to do some analysis.
So those
it's
4.
like research. The research, if they're redacted, they're public, they're peace officers as defined by the California Government Code. The department and their names have been redacted because of the potential of harm to them.
The name is perhaps properly redacted. I don't think we're going to argue that right this sec. I hope not. The department that they work for, if it's just a person who works for the sheriff's department, I'm not sure that you've got a good basis for redacting that. Tell me if there's a column in this thing that would say sheriff or deputy sheriff or something like that.
I'm sorry.
This is mine. You have the tabloid size.
Maybe you guys could share or something.
But I could not squeeze Excel column A through Excel column WWW on a little sheet of paper and have you.
Victor, do you have a copy of this page that they can, like,
Page is it?
165?
It's a large spreadsheet. It'll take me a moment to answer your question. May I use the table, sir? Thank you.
No, I think we need to move through this efficiently. I think we need to be moving through this.
Yeah.
And the question is there a column on that? Data analysis aside, let's set aside the issue of data analysis. Is there a column listing which public safety departments loan recipients worked in?
I don't see one. But I think that's a question that we would have to ask the manager of the department.
Why would you keep that information in the first place? Why would you keep the information on which public safety departments loan recipients worked in?
It's probably part of the application process. And
I think so. I am not a BMR program person, sir.
Okay.
I am Sunshine Officer and Environmental Review Officer.
I understand that was sort of a policy question that sort of outlined.
The 2 data sets from last year, the January of 14, was this a Chandra Egan who put this together? Is that possible?
Chandra works for Sophie. She does a completely different function, and Sophie knows more about that. That's about...
Is she the person who probably did the thing last year? Okay, and she's a policy person? She's not a BMR person? I'm not saying she's a bad person or a good person.
Ms. Egan is a wonderful person.
Okay.
She actually has a history in both policy and the inclusionary housing program and the single-family side. So she has probably one of the longest institutional memories in the department about the program.
Okay. Can you surmise from pages 172 and 173 where the column borrower occupation or department job title, where that might have been pulled from, and if that's buried in the new master spreadsheet or if this was from other program documents.
What he's referring to is, these.
Right, so that was from last year, so I'm
That's
asking
172 and
if that is
173.
somehow buried in the new master spreadsheet. Anybody?
How would Chandra have pulled that?
She did, and I made this spreadsheet.
Ooh, gets better and better.
And I'll be quite frank, gentlemen, is the reason we made it was to be cooperative and to assist with information needs. It is not an original document. I worked with two members of the staff, took several hours of our time to construct that spreadsheet with the 14 or 10. I don't remember how many are on it. So
That's cool, and I appreciate that. All I'm asking is, did you pull the occupation from some other spreadsheet, or did somebody have to type that in from the
they had to
individual
go into
applications?
the application files and put it in there.
Okay, so this is really just pulling out from the, okay,
You know what a real estate envelope looks like.
Right.
okay.
So again, it appears that we're in a situation where this is just not data that was kept in the spreadsheet that was requested.
Exactly.
And again, maybe the suggestion to the department is in the annual report, if there's a way to pull that information or somehow, if anyone cares about the first responder program, because if 90% of the things are going to the fire department versus police department members, then maybe that's interesting to someone. I don't know.
So if we're to move forward and understanding that's the issue with 1B, all right? And we're not saying that is or is not a violation, but let's just move forward so that we can understand what these other rows are about. 2A looks like it was belatedly responded to, that only Sunshine Order, only the task force received it in response to your complaint, but that you did not receive it personally. Is that correct?
That's right.
That's right.
I don't believe I got an updated spreadsheet on May 19th. I think the first time I saw it may have been in a reply to you guys.
Okay.
But this, what happened to the part of Sunshine that if you ask an oral question, they don't have to take more than 15 minutes to reply to you. But where is the common sense? When you ask something like 2A, how many loans are you planning for the first responders in the current fiscal year? You would think that would be off the top or the tip of somebody's head.
And maybe
Would know the number and wouldn't need anywhere near more than 30 seconds to answer the question.
I'm not sure that's true. Plus, we have a list here of 15 different items, each of which necessitate a different response. I'm not sure that all this information is off the top of everybody's head. It sounds to me that a lot of this information is buried in application files that did not, some of that information was not transferred into the data file that the department needs to operate, in a fluid manner. So I'm not satisfied that this should have been, or could have been provided in a 15-minute period. I don't think that doesn't resonate with me. Now,
And it wasn't an oral request anyway.
So you might as well conclude the same thing with 2B. That they don't know whether each individual loan is going to creep up to $200,000, and instead of in the budgeting for 10 $100,000 loans, they're going to cut the number of loans issued to 5 and make them all $200 loans, and the program officers don't know that either. Is that what you're telling me?
I'm not telling you what they do or do not know.
No, but you're making up plenty of excuses.
Well, Mr. Monette-Shaw, as a point of order, could you please sit down until we have a question for you?
I thought you wanted to go through them one by one.
I will ask you questions as they arise, but I'm not going to be yelled at up here.
So, Mr. Flannery, on 2A and 2B, the Housing Trust Fund budget that's attached here somewhere, does that generally have the allocations between programs?
I think, I was told by when I spoke to Maria that the loans are going up to $200,000. I think that's in the budget, and that is in the program manual that we mentioned in the link. So there's so many documents to these programs.
I don't think the program manual...
Mr. Monette-Shaw, until we ask you a question, this is not a free comment zone.
So all right, so let's say whether it's Mr. Monette Shaw or somebody else, let's say I decided that I cared about housing. Unlikely, but whatever. Where's the best place to go to understand the details of all of these programs? It really is mind-numbing and complicated, and we've got manuals, and we've got forms, and we've got people, and it's all back and forth, and my loan officer and her friend and the title company and all the whatever. It really is that much of a mess? Is there somebody at MOH who can help me? Who can help me work through that? Not here, but conceptually. Mm-hmm. Where do you go? How do you deal with this?
I will say, of course, it depends on the question, but in response to the line of questioning that we were following before that, I just want to say that in the area of these down payment assistance loans, we have money in our budget and in our housing trust fund that are allocated toward the down payment assistance loan program. Not all of it was used in the last year. Not all of the loans went out the door. And each loan is of a different amount depending on the calculation of the person's need and the amount needed to satisfy the purchase of the property. So each loan is different. So we don't, all of this to say, we don't have necessarily a waiting pool of people who are going to get loans in the next year, and we don't know exactly how much each individual borrower would get.
Does the manual describe what happens?
But we have maximums, and we have loan-to-value ratios, and we have limits.
And if not enough people, does the money carry over? The manual describes all of this stuff in excruciating detail, or some detail?
I think that your point of excruciating is probably correct. It's perhaps not in a simple narrative that is easy to digest, but the combination of our budget, the loan maximums, you could work backwards and assume what would be the maximum number of loans that we could give.
And the total amount in this whole housing trust fund was, help me?
Oh, in the housing trust fund, it's $25 million per year, and then it was bonded, so it came up to 50.
Okay. So it's not like, and the number of loans?
But not all of that is allocated toward down payment assistance. I want to be clear.
But the total number of loans every year, or that currently, it's not tens, it's not thousands, it's hundreds?
It's under 100.
Under
per
100?
Year.
For all programs, or just no? See, this is where I get confused.
I'd have to get back to you with the exact number.
Okay, I'm sorry I keep saying this, but again, whether it's the annual report or maybe something more
Absolutely.
frequently.
Our annual report is posted on our website, and it summarizes the number of down payment assistance loans issued per year. Absolutely.
Now I'm thinking that if you even had something more frequent than that, maybe not monthly, maybe a quarterly report that summarized major activity in your various programs, so you could say, hey, 2,500 people just signed up for blah, blah, blah. And by the way, there's some new BMR or set-aside inclusionary, whatever the hell thing downtown because of the... So, because I hear people that get emails from your office every week for whatever, and I'm just getting overwhelmed by the programs and the details. And if you can somehow try to summarize and package that so you can say, hey, we're doing great things with all this money. I'm sure you've got a good story to tell, or a story to tell, and people can decide whether it's good or not. If you wait till just the annual report, that may be too late, and somebody may say, hey, you might, in fact, want to encourage people because, hey, 8 people fell out of that program. You actually have capacity if people would apply, blah, blah. Whatever the thing, if you can find some way to communicate that more broadly, more frequently, in an appropriate way, that might do us all good here.
Perhaps helpful to note that, and I'm sorry, I don't know if that was a question. We are overhauling our website. We're increasing our reporting, but Mr. Monette Shaw referred specifically to the civil grand jury report, which did call for us to revive the annual report, which was a heavy lift. So I agree it would be great to do a quarterly report, but I'm very focused on getting our second annual report out.
That's cool. I was just thinking it doesn't have to be the same detail as the annual report, just some like program highlights where you've got something. Programs like this must have lots of metrics, and so you can figure out. You're all about planning and metrics, right?
There are two good resources now, and that's one that we're overhauling our website, which is moderately better. And then the second is that the mayor has released the mayor's housing portal, which is a clearinghouse of information for particularly important if you're looking across departments, because people generally are looking at Mayor's Office of Housing, but perhaps also looking for information that they don't know is located at DPH or HSA, for example. We're all very related, and planning.
Yeah, I mean, if you could sort of relate this to the planning pipeline stuff with the quarterly, the 100% AMI, there's a lot of stuff out there, and I don't know, I know a little bit, obviously, but not enough to navigate, and the more you can relate this stuff and make it useful.
I agree. That certainly goes beyond the specific sunshine issue, but that is a huge issue that we are focused on, and it's interagency.
Where were we? Are we still doing this?
I mean, the rest of the requests are going to be the same. Are going to be the same discussion, and I can predict what's going to happen. It's that, you know, the Mayor's Office of Housing does not maintain that data in this format, or does not maintain that data in a cognizable public record, that it does not maintain that data at all, but it hopes to have some of that data reflected in the annual report, but that it produced what it had that was responsive to the requests. It did not go to the level, perhaps, of a prior year's production, where additional effort was put into creating a new record, which they had no obligation to do. But they had no obligation to do that, and maybe they're going to do that this year. Maybe that's coming. That's forthcoming in an annual report. A lot of the data that you requested, but we could march through each of these. But I'm feeling the same way about each of the ones that we've been through up until this point. I think what the items requested are I hate to just issue a blanket sense of what I'm feeling, but it seems to me that for, particularly given the specificity and numerous records requested, that the Mayor's Office of Housing has done quite a bit of work to produce what it had that was responsive, and it may not have answered each direct question. And if I could recommend to the complainant anything, it's maybe, if you want one of these discrete questions answered, don't lump it in with 50 other requests, because especially in an IDR, it's not going to be answered to the extent and the specificity that you want. There might be answers to some of these issues that can be answered under a 15-minute period.
And I would suggest that between Ms. Hayward, Mr. Flannery, or somebody over at MOH, maybe Ms. Benjamin, somebody could make some time available to either answer questions or point Mr. Monette Shaw to where data exists. Mr. Monette Shaw is not a dumb person at all, and if you say here is where it is and da-da-da, I'm sure he'll figure it out. I think he just needs a little help in getting through what's otherwise a pretty massive scope of thing. Am I wrong about that, Mr. Monette Shaw?
I wouldn't say I'm pretty smart.
I would.
I think you're pretty smart.
I second that motion.
I'm tenacious, okay? And I will offer here, in the interest of time, to take all of these remaining ones in one fell swoop. It is shocking that they don't know how many first responder loans were issued versus the non-first responder loans. They have separate programs, and they have no metrics, no reporting of how many kinds of loans were issued to the teachers versus the firefighters versus the police officers versus just regular people out in San Francisco who all are competing for the same pot of housing money that's going to reach over $1.3 billion in the trust fund simply by rating the general fund. Then there's the inclusionary housing money. That housing trust fund is going to have $2 or $3 or $4 billion in it that will be spent year in and year out, and they have no metrics to show what they've done with it, and they keep no records of it?
That's not what I heard, Mr. Monette Shaw.
That's what I'm hearing, is they don't have records They are not going to summarize this stuff for the annual report. I can almost guarantee you they will not go into that level of detail.
I would suggest...
And they won't report their accomplishments.
So I'm going to suggest that we take the rebuttal. So I think that the complainant now has can begin the rebuttal. And that's you, Mr. Monette Shaw. This is the time for your rebuttal.
While the clock is kicking down,
do you need a moment to gather your notes before we start the clock?
no.
Okay.
I said while the clock is ticking down, you do have a reason to forward this to the full task force. They went over the deadline to respond. If nothing else, you need to refer it to the full task force for them being tardy. Under 6727A, they did not provide any permissive exemption to withholding the data, right? And if you're suggesting simply to let them off the hook because they have sloppy record keeping that even the grand jury was appalled by, and the fact that they hadn't issued an annual report in, what was it, 8 years, close to a decade?
You don't need to respond.
That they are not keeping records in a business-like manner. I don't care what you say, Chair Hittner. This is not the way you administer public funds. By simply saying, we haven't thought about collecting this. Maybe by the time we issue our next annual report, we might think about maybe possibly starting to collect some of this data in case people are interested in why they are being evicted and pushed out of San Francisco and being displaced. This is really pathetic performance of record keeping. There has got to be at least a referral to the task force that they missed the deadline in which to respond. If not, being shamed that they keep crap for records.
Okay, and then we have an opportunity for the respondents to have their rebuttal.
Sophie Hayward, Mayor's Office of Housing. I have my phone here because I pulled up our annual report, which is posted on the website, and I apologize that I didn't have a copy of it here with me today. I was focused completely on the sunshine issue, but because our record keeping and the quality of our data has come under question, and I want to make sure that at least the information is out there. On page 46 of our annual report, which is posted on our website, there's an appendix that includes Table 6, and it's a summary of the down payment assistance loan program activities for fiscal year 2012 and 13 and 13-14. So if you'd like, I can just quickly go through that if that provides the information. We issue a number of different, and it's not long, it's a short chart.
Please.
We issue a number of different down payment assistance loans, and there are grants as well. So for the so-called regular down payment assistance loans, we issued 19 in 2012-13 and 12 in 2013-14. And then for the first responder DALPs, in 2013-14, there were 4. Teacher Next Door, there were 8 grants awarded in 2013-14 and 2 in 2012-13. That's a $20,000 grant. And then there are 3 additional programs for a total of an additional 47 loans in 2012-13 and 42 in 2013-14. And so the total home purchase assistance provided by Mo in 2012-13, the combination, 68, and in 13-14, that's 76. Total outstanding loans made as of June 30th, 2014, that were still active was 412. All of that's
all programs. Sorry, across all programs.
Across all programs, but that Those are outstanding loans that were still active. There have been loans that were repaid in full over the course of the program's history. So that is on page 46 of the annual report. It's in our appendix, which is posted on our website. And I think that the easiest thing to do is to go to sfmocd.org or
Yes.
.gov.org, but then to search for the annual report within the website, because it's not completely obvious where it is on the website, but once you search there for the annual report, it's there. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think I'm feeling not a violation here. I think we've had lengthy discussion about this. I think perhaps there's general agreement that better storytelling, better reporting would be good. If MOH didn't provide Mr. Monette Shaw with a copy of the annual report for 13-14.
I know where to find it on the web.
He knows where to find it. That's cool. I suspect that if Mr. Monette Shaw has specific suggestions for next year's annual report, that MOH would consider them. It sounds like you're a major consumer of their data and information, and that's good. And so if there are things that they should be reporting or could be reporting, positive or negative, that would be helpful. But I'm just not really feeling a violation as to the specific Sunshine request here. I think they provided the data. I would, though, note the timeliness violation, so I guess a recommendation for a finding of a violation on 67.25A would be in order. So I guess that's where I end up.
I agree.
I'm willing to do something else if you feel differently.
You know, I think that this is a situation that we see often where information is requested that does not exist in the format that was requested or does not exist at all or is not being kept. I find here in particular that the Mayor's Office on Housing is very aware of the deficiencies in their department. They've been put on notice of that by the civil grand jury and are working on that. The other thing that I'm noting here, and this is the type of thing that when it's on the margins, when we're deliberating whether there is an ambiguous, maybe there's a violation, maybe there's not. What I'm seeing here is a refreshing lack of indignancy. I mean, they came here and are very forthcoming about what they've provided, and I think that they've expressed a genuine willingness to work with the complainant in this matter to come to some resolution. And I have a hunch that any sort of collaborative efforts like that or ongoing responsiveness to public records requests in a fully helpful manner will depend in part on the complainant's approach and will depend in part on the complainant's willingness to entertain, to be patient with some of the records responses. I think that the ecosystem of this complaint and the ambiguity of whether there is an actual violation as to the production of public records, I'm satisfied that things are getting better, and that to the extent that they could and to the extent that the records were being kept in that manner, they responded adequately to the complainant's responses, albeit in requests, albeit in a late manner that was acknowledged by Mr. Flannery. So that's my thinking on it as well. And if that's a motion for a violation of 67.25 as to the belated response.
Is that your second?
Was that a motion? Did you make a motion?
I can form that into a motion. Good with that?
Okay.
All right.
Then I will
Motion is
second that.
made by Member Pell, seconded by Member Chair Hefner.
And if there's public comment on that motion?
This is Sophie Johnson, and I think that motion should be change the rules to keep records and not to, get some kind of pleasure out of, doing what and not to proceed in records. That very bad news. I'm building and construction and trying to get money for the states and reproductive programs for healthcare and poor and people going out, being students and living out and poor, being forced. This has got kind of needs a whole lot of rules that need to be changed. This is really disrespecting the whole world in that respect. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any additional public comment? Seeing none, yes?
Since we included some language in the earlier motions, could we maybe just include here that we recognize that MOH acknowledged that they could do better on record keeping and reporting? We support their efforts to improve that, including more information in the annual report and perhaps in other reports.
Yes, I think that's appropriate, and it would be illustrative for our records to know that this has already come up again, and should it come up again and again and again with the Mayor's Office on Housing, maybe that will inform our determinations down the line.
So we'll add something.
On that motion, Member Pelpel.
Aye.
Pelpel, aye. Member Haynes.
Aye.
Haynes, aye. Chair Hepner.
Aye.
Hepner, aye. The motion passes. Next on the agenda is announcements, comments, questions, and future agenda items. Are there any announcements?
Just that, and I'm sure we'll talk about this at the full task force hearing, that the amendment to the calendar legislation was passed today by the Board of Supervisors, and I haven't had time, but we all should take time to review the amendments and the minutes of the Board of Supervisors meeting to, have some conversation.
I will attempt to provide a copy for the July 1st meeting.
That'd be great.
Thank you very much. And if you get it sooner, you might want to just send it around as well.
I will attempt to.
Because they'll have the second reading next week.
Okay.
There being no further announcement, item 9, adjournment.
Did we need to take public comment on item 8? I'm sorry. I don't know if
well, are there? I can ask if there are any announcements from the public.
Sorry.
Yeah, I'm Sylvie Johnson, and I have announcements that the progress is in the building and progress is in keeping everything straight, which where we take our vacations too much, but our priorities kind of get, as what you call spoiled. And this is why I want to keep, stay as a resolution, because that's where our state needs to be started out for, new priorities. And we don't see this in the peace, because that's where wars are, because they don't realize the progress that they're doing, that is causing, and whatever babies be thinking about, and bringing them children up. Thank you.
Thank you.
Without objection.
So that concludes item number 8, and number 9, if we could take adjournment without objection.
Without objection.
Thank you.
Without objection.
Thank you.